This is Newsroom. Hello and welcome from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, you've not seen the show. It's always live and it's broadcast from a studios here in Auckland Park. Don't forget, the entire 3-hour show from 9 until 12 is available on demand on our YouTube channel. You can also watch it live if you like. Busy Monday morning's news ahead of us. Elvis is here, as always, standing by to give us a quick update. But before we talk to Elvis, Anine, what's happening on Monday morning?
Well, in Johannesburg, traffic trending this morning on Twitter, and that's mainly because of the Kaya Sands protest action we've seen on parts of Witkoppen Road. We will have a look at a video on that later, and we also have our radio reporter, Jock Steenkamp, on the scene.
Yeah, but in your news today, the African National Congress, big day for them after the NGC that happened this weekend. We'll also keep a close eye on the elections in Guinea. The counting has begun in those polls. Plus, of course, the ICC. We might leave the ICC. That also emerged from the National General Council this weekend.
Yeah, busy news morning ahead of us with Elvis, who's standing by. Well, he'll be seated shortly to give us a full update. But let's get news from Kendall. It's been such a busy sporting weekend.
It's been a cracker. It's been an absolute cracker. What with the pool stages ending at the Rugby World Cup, as well as Mercedes winning the Constructors' Championship. But more about all of that a little later.
First, your headlines. Parliament must now decide whether South Africa should withdraw from the International Criminal Court after the African National Congress, NGC, passes a motion for the country to leave the court. Counting has begun in Guinea's capital shortly after polling stations closed last night. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan faces mounting anger over the country's worst attack that killed 97 people at the weekend. Those are all your headlines, but first let's take a look at what is coming up in your sports news with Kendall Makamate.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Like you just said, let's take a quick look at what's coming up in sports today.
Crouch. Bind. Set.
Now, the quarter-final clashes emerge as the thriller-minute Rugby World Cup signs off on the pool stages in what's already being billed as one of the more exciting World Cups in recent memory. And Lewis Hamilton rose ever closer to a successful defense of his Drivers' Championship title, winning the Russian Grand Prix as teammate Nico Rosberg's car falters. This as Ferrari's Kimi Raikkonen receives a penalty demotion, giving Mercedes their second successive Constructors' Championship. And a new star is on the rise for the Proteas as Kagiso Rabada holds his composure and steers the ship home with a fantastic final over in the first ODI against India since the World Cup down under. And that's where we're going to leave it for now. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. Your top story this hour. The African National Congress has made a renewed call for unity at the closing of the National General Council in Midrand, north of Johannesburg in Gauteng. The party's president, Jacob Zuma, says the movement has resolved to mobilize all South Africans behind its vision of a non-racial country.
The song saying the day we returned, perhaps apt for the mission this organization wants to embark upon. In a frank assessment of its work, the ANC says it's putting corrective measures into place. First, reaffirming the centrality of its branches.
The branch is the basic unit of the ANC and the most important structure in the movement. It is in the branch that ANC members put to use their skills, energy, political insight, and experience in a program to transform society.
But the party knows it will have to do much to repair its image, from rooting out corruption to winning back its traditional support base.
Government should conduct a lifestyle audit for all employees of the state and its related entities.
The number of provinces is also set to be reviewed to strengthen government. The party has also urged full implementation on 50-50 gender principle. But the biggest headache for the ANC is next year's local government elections. Some metros are in danger of slipping out of their hands.
The NGC has noted the voting trends in the metros and that this requires the movement to review its strategies.
Delegates have described this NGC as the most successful. This NGC has seen a renewed sense of optimism from these delegates. But they know very well that optimism alone will not be sufficient. What is required is for them to go out and implement whatever they have agreed upon. Mzwandile Mbeji, SABC News, Midrand.
Political analysts say South Africa's decision to withdraw from the International Criminal Court is aimed at conforming to a broader continental issue. Parliament must now decide whether South Africa should withdraw from the court. This after the NGC of the ANC passed a resolution for the country to leave the court, which is based in The Hague. The government has been criticized for ignoring an order to arrest the indicted Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir when he attended a conference in Johannesburg in June. The ANC has lambasted the International Criminal Court, saying it has lost direction.
The International Relations Subcommittee, buoyant after the General Council unanimously gave a thumbs up to the proposal that the country should review its membership of the ICC.
The NGC has just resolved that South Africa should withdraw from the International Court. However, only after we have followed certain processes. One, the reasons and the motivations that we ought to share with the rest of the continent as to why we think the court is no longer fulfilling its mandate.
The Relations Minister says South Africa will take the issue to the Assembly of State Parties meeting at The Hague in the first quarter of 2016.
We have publicly, through the media, last week informed that we have submitted an agenda item for the review. The Rome statutes are reviewed through the meetings of the ASP.
The ANC says its delegates have lost faith in the International Criminal Court's impartiality and has accused the ICC as being biased against Africa. The decision follows a dispute early this year when South Africa refused to arrest Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir when he attended the AU summit. Al-Bashir is wanted by the ICC for alleged war crimes in Darfur, where the UN estimates more than 300,000 people have been killed. But the withdrawal will not be immediate. The ANC says the implications will still be discussed. Delegates also debated the strained relations between the United States of America and Russia.
I think we were, again, confirmed to have been correct when we said the big powers or the permanent members themselves put their interests before all of us. For the mere fact that now you have two members of the Security Council in another country confirms that the time is but now to reform.
The ANC says its anti-ICC stance doesn't mean that South Africa's ruling party condones human rights abuses and atrocities in Africa and the rest of the world. It has resolved to back the formation of the African Court of Human Rights, which would deal with those committing atrocities across Africa. Meanwhile, the ruling party says, as a member of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, Sudan is entitled to attend the meeting in Johannesburg later this year. Tumalo Mohlaudi, SABC News, ANC NGC Midrand.
The Abatembu royal family and traditional leaders in the Eastern Cape have endorsed Prince Azanati Zanalizwe as the recent king of the Abatembu nation. Now, this comes after the Supreme Court of Appeal turned down King Buyelekaya Dalinyebo's appeal against a 15-year sentence, which was reduced to 12 years for crimes committed between 1995 and 1996. The royal family believes that Prince Azanati Dalinyebo should be an acting king while his father is busy with legal battles about his conviction. The crimes include arson, culpable homicide, kidnapping, and defeating the ends of justice. However, the anti-king faction still believes that the endorsement of Prince Azanati as the regent king is illegitimate in terms of indigenous principles of the Abatembu. Counting has begun in Guinea's capital shortly after polling stations closed last night. The polls pitted the president, Alpha Condé, against his main rival, Celo Dalien Diallo. This is the second election in the West African country since its independence from France nearly 6 years ago. The 77-year-old Condé is widely expected to win a second mandate, although the results were expected to be close enough to require a second round against Diallo. Around a dozen people died during clashes in the run-up, and the opposition called for voting to be delayed because of fears about fraud. Some polling stations opened late, and there were complaints of lack of paperwork and officials arriving late in some of the polling stations. Turkey says 2 male suicide bombers carried out the devastating twin bombings this weekend in Ankara. 97 people were killed and scores injured in the deadliest attack in the history of modern Turkey. Meanwhile, thousands of mourners filled the streets of Ankara and vented their anger at the president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Pro-Kurdish supporters scuffle with police near the scene of twin suicide attacks the day before, after they tried to push through a security barricade to lay down carnations. Saturday's blasts at a pro-Kurdish rally in the Turkish capital left nearly 130 killed and scores more wounded. Elsewhere in the mainly Kurdish southeastern city of Diyarbakir, police clash with protesters denouncing the attack. At the Ankara morgue, where bodies are still being identified, loved ones of those killed gathered to mourn their dead, their emotional wounds still raw. Survivors describe the gruesome attack, which some say was made worse by the authorities.
As we tried to carry the wounded away, police attacked us with tear gas canisters. And for about half an hour, we tried to run from the police that were preventing us from taking the wounded away. For almost 45 minutes, the wounded had to wait at the blast site. The ambulances did not come. They would not let the ambulance drive in.
The activists were protesting a recent flare-up in violence between security forces and the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the Kurdish southeast, which has left hundreds killed.
And that's how we end this bulletin for this hour. Eben Janssen is standing by to delve deeper into stories making headlines with some insightful interviews. It's over to you, Eben.
Thank you very much, Elvis. Very good morning to you once again. Now, it is concerning that South Africa still struggles with its national identity, said the ANC over the weekend at Gallagher Estate. Is there a South African identity that we all subscribe to, that we all hold dear, that we would all give up our lives to defend? This question was asked to the media by the Social Transformation Subcommittee Chairperson Lindiwe Sisulu, this after the ANC's National General Council this weekend. Today, we look at the national symbols that we use to direct, organize, record history and communicate our story. More importantly, these symbols instill pride and unity.
Nkosi sikelela i-Afrika. A call to the heavens to protect the continent. Closer to home, the South African national anthem is a nation's pride and form of identity. Much like the national flag, it is the most common symbol. Both became known in April 1994, symbolizing freedom, new beginnings, and filling the hearts of South Africans with hope. But there are other symbols to take pride in. Take the springbok, for example. It takes its name from the Afrikaans language. Spring identifies its ability to jump, and bok identifies the antelope or deer species of its nature. Just like the national rugby team that it is named after, the springbok is an element full of energy and majesty. It flaunts its ability to jump around and impress, and it is resilient and tackles responsibility head-on. Its power and ability is also displayed on the country's currency, the 1 rand coin. The king protea, a distinctive, bold flower. It symbolizes the beauty of our land and the potential of our nation. The protea adorns South Africa's sports jerseys, spreading beauty wherever it is. It blossoms even brighter as the name of the national cricket team. So diverse, it also decorates the 20-cent coin. The blue crane symbolizes the country's elegance, its ability to stand tall and exude confidence. The real yellowwood, our forefathers' wish for this democracy to live long and take its place in the world. Believed to be the marine equivalent of the springbok, the galjoen is the country's national fish. The importance of the coat of arms can be seen in how all government departments identify themselves with it. Starting from its head, the rising sun symbolizes splendor, the country's rebirth, life and willpower. The secretary bird depicts the ascendance of the nation, its growth and speed. The spear and the nopkiri are for the nation's protection against enemies, reflecting defense on authority, yet calling for peace. The protea, once again, depicting beauty and potential. The humans within the shield in a greeting motion is South Africa's plea for unity and for the nation to work as a collective. The ears of wheat symbolize fertility, growth and development, as well as the country's agricultural prospects. The elephant tusks show wisdom and strength embedded within South Africa. And what many still wonder about is the motto. In the Khoisan language, it means diverse people unite. Once again calling for the diverse nation to become one and stand together with pride. Olebogeng Khosilenzwe for Newsroom in Johannesburg.
Lovely package, lovely look there at what our symbols are, what they look like, what they mean for us. Now, for more insight on our national symbols, by the way, our question of the day is to you out there. It says, do you know what our national symbols are and what they stand for? Send us your contribution. Now, for more, we are joined from our Pretoria studios this morning by the National Herald, Mr. Themba Mabaso. Mr. Mabaso, a very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Mr. Mabaso, we saw this weekend after the ANC's NGC that, the subcommittee, Social Transformation Subcommittee Chairperson, Lindiwe Sisulu, she came out, she says, it is concerning that South Africa still struggles with its national identity. Now, 21 years later, what is your view on this, and can I get your reaction?
Yeah, I think we have a very good set of national identity as a South Africa. We've got primary national symbols, which is a flag, a coat of arms, and the national anthem. And then we've got secondary national symbols, which are your plant and animal that we have already shown into the footages. And we've got a number of others, like ceremonial one, the mace and the black rod, and so on. And these are the very beautiful symbols that we've got. I think the issue at hand for me is that also they need to be adopted and loved, and people need to be thirsty to know more about these symbols. And this is the issue, because you may have the identity, but as soon as you dwell into it and you adopt it and love it, this is how you also understand who you are. It's a matter of people also having that enthusiasm to learn more about their symbols.
Do you think South Africans lack a little bit of that passion to interact with what gives us our identity?
I think they do. Sometimes we are assisted by events. Let me just give you an example. Leading to 2010, from 2009 up to 2011, the way we interacted with our national symbols, it showed the world that we love them, and it also propelled, especially our flag, to be one of the third most recognized flag in the world. That was not by just magic. It was just because we as South Africans also rallied around our flag. We've displayed it. You will find it, especially during those times, throughout all the media and even businesses. You will find them flying in their offices and outside the buildings, and therefore it shows that South Africans love their national symbols and they display them. As a brand image, as you know, with the brand images of products, you need to be top of mind. You need to be visible, and people need to talk about it. And therefore, there is a need for us to always learn more about our symbols and also to display them and to show them in public. But also, most especially for us to learn, especially the anthem, to sing it and understand the etiquette around them. And therefore, it's about us also making sure that our symbols are on top of mind and that we know about them.
Which, in your view, are the most important symbols that South Africans should think about, maybe in the most respectful of ways?
Yes, I think we will talk about the primary national symbols, which will be your flag. The flag is about the people. It's what we can put crudely as a brand image. It's the image that we portray whenever we are in an international arena, especially in sport. You'll see that before even the match start, there will be flags there. And the second one will be the national anthem. It is the most expressive one and the most emotional of all the national symbols, because it also conveys our emotions, the message, our aspirations. And if you look at our anthem, it's about us also petitioning the High Most to bless us for protection. And at the end of the anthem, we also talk about the natural beauty of our country. Therefore, we are giving thanks to say we've been endowed with this particular beauty. It's part about that. And therefore, it is very, very important that we know the words, we understand them, and we respect it. And the last one is the national coat of arms. That is an image of the state of government, which is also embellishes our coin, our very important document like identities, because with that it is a seal to show that that is authorized. It is something that is government authorized entities and documents, and therefore those are very, very important. But that doesn't mean that we can negate the others, because they too have got their own role. Just to give you an example, with the plant and animal national symbols, we call them living heritage. They are also showing what we've been endowed with as a country, because each and every country has been given something that is unique, and therefore you pick those things that are unique in your country and you protect them and you elevate them into a national status. By so doing, you are trying to recognize your natural resources, plus also making sure that if ever there is any of those that are getting to be extinct, you protect it. But it's about us appreciating what we've got, which eventually also help us to have people to know that we've got something unique. It helps us in terms of tourism, for example, because it's part of our value that we've got as a country.
I want to ask you about the way that we handle or the way that we treat our symbols and how you view that. You know, you mentioned the flag as probably our most important symbol here in South Africa, but week in, week out, weekends in, you see people with a flag in the one hand and the beer in another hand, and there doesn't seem to be that level of respect for such an important symbol. How do you view this?
Yeah, we try by all means to make sure that people understand the etiquettes. We call them etiquettes around the national symbols, especially the flag and the anthem. The symbols need to be respected because they really honor the country. They represent the aspiration of the country. And as a result, whenever individuals engage with them, they need to pay a lot of respect. For a flag, I think what has messed up is the fact that it has been used a lot in sporting events, and people tend to be in a jubilant manner. And sometimes they forget about the etiquette that need to be there. Therefore, I would like to also to remind people to make sure that whenever they engage with the symbols, they need to pay a lot of respect to them, especially the flag, because it represents the country. And there are a lot of this. Just to mention a few, it must not be dragged on the floor. And also it must not be utilized, especially to opening events or like the races. And I've seen also people who are selling things trying to be very patriotic. They'll put it on top of a table and put the products on top of that. Therefore, they are using it as a tablecloth. That is a way that is denigrating the flag. It's compromising its integrity. And therefore, we would like to remind people to make sure that they use the flag in an appropriate manner, but they must show a lot of respect about the flag.
Mr. Mabasa, thank you for your contribution today, coming to you live from our studios in the capital, Pretoria. That is Themba Mabasa. He's the National Herald. That's the man that looks after our symbols, that makes sure that we don't denigrate, well, what we should really be holding in such high esteem. Time for us to move on. We go to Anine now, who's going to give us an update as to what's developing on social media. What's the conversation like on social media this morning? Anine?
Well, yes, Evan, like I mentioned earlier, Johannesburg traffic trending this morning on Twitter. We also see that Witkoppen is trending. That's because the Witkoppen Road has been affected by this Kaya Sands protest. We do have a video if you want to see what that protest action looked like. It was actually taken around before 7 this morning, where we see hundreds of protesters going down towards Witkoppen. As far as I understand, this is where this was shot. And you also see towards the end of the video that tear gas was fired. Now, I did speak to the JMPD a bit earlier. They just warned that motorists should really steer away from Witkoppen Road for the entire day, use the N1. And like I mentioned, Eben, our journalist, Jock Steenkamp, he's at the scene. Because different reasons are emerging on Twitter because of this protest, the reason for this protest at least. Jock Steenkamp is saying is that these hundreds of protesters, they want to meet with the MEC, Jacob Mamabolo, to hand over a memorandum. They want to be included in the Lion Park development plan, which is set to kind of take off in 2017. So we see housing issues here. Yeah. Police initially said protest delivery, or service delivery at least, poor service delivery, that could be an issue. So we'll wait and see how the story develops later today.
That story will develop. Our reporters are on the scene. We'll keep you updated how it develops today. But Anine, what else?
These actually are the tweets coming in from Kaya Sands. This one you see from John Steenkamp. He says that all of the protesters are waiting to hand over the memorandum to the MEC of Housing in Gauteng. The situation seems to be calm right now. Last night, though, a lot of pictures of burning tyres and so on. This is just what other people are tweeting. People sit in traffic, no access to Kaya Sands.
Caused a lot of traffic delays in and around the city this morning.
And this guy, Marlon, tweeting something about xenophobia, but I don't think we should jump the gun just yet. Like I said, mainly housing concerns that these protesters are taking to the streets, the reason they're taking to the streets this morning. But yes, avoid Witkoppen. That's what the JMPD says, if you want to stay safe, if you want to avoid traffic. Then, Eben, the other two big stories coming from the court this morning, DJ Sebolai.
Donald Duck.
Donald Duck, yes, that's the hashtag you can follow. We're expecting judgments in that case. So just check for that there. You see the hashtag being thrown up on the screen.
DJ Donald Duck.
Whatever that judgment is, that will first break on Twitter. And then also Kretscher, he's appearing with his 5 co-accused, and sentencing will resume there. And of course, you can follow our SABC News online platform for that. Just follow the hashtag Kretscher.
Okay, Anine, is that a wrap? Is that a wrap for you for now?
That's basically a wrap. If you do want to end with a very nice story that's been, people have been talking about on social media for the last 24 hours. Even, do you remember Kanye West saying at the MTV Awards that he wants to run for president?
Yes, President Barack Obama gave him an earful about that at the time.
Yes, he did. A bit of tongue-in-cheek. He said he literally gave him kind of like a pointer list of what Kanye West can be expecting to deal with. He said, listen, firstly, you can expect to deal with a lot of strange characters. Now, Obama should know a lot about this. He's probably dealt with Donald Trump, and that's why he's giving this advice to Kanye West. Then he's saying, listen, if this is something you want to do, you can't use terms like saying a beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy, which we know is Kanye West. That's one of his albums. That's what it's called. And he's telling him, listen, do you really think America is going to vote with someone that has a name like Kanye? So we see the president really having a sense of humor there.
Yeah, he's had a go at Donald Trump as well. Now it's Kanye West. There's a bit of a feud there developing between the West family, let's call it that, and, of course, the Obama family.
The actual first family, right?
The real first family. Anyhow, time for us to move on. Yes, chaos ensued this morning as well. More than 200 residents, we can confirm now, from Kaya Sands informal settlement blocked the roads with rocks and stoning passing cars in a protest there. Major routes from around Witkoppen Road were affected. Motorists have been urged to use alternative roads. Some of you have been sending in quite a few tweets and pics about what's happening. Tyrant says people who vandalise roads, that takes away other people's freedom of movement and the right to do so, get to work. Safety, talk about Witkoppen Road there. Ray says, tyre sticks and stones on Witkoppen Road, Northumberland. I wonder what's going on. It is a protest, Ray. Protest is going on there, my friend. Kalejo Lechodi says, Kaya Sands protest, the service delivery protest has affected some parts of Witkoppen Road. Then Pelisa says, yep, Witkoppen is closed. Don't know why they're striking, though. Nonake, heard gunshots, vuvuzelas just outside our complex. Yes, it's been that kind of morning in the northern parts of Johannesburg. Modiege Mogali says, can we talk about what is happening on Witkoppen? Looks like a bomb exploded. No, it's only a protest. Unhappy residents have taken to the streets about early reports from our reporters that they want to be included in a new Lion Park development that is around that sort of area. But our reporters will follow up and get back to us a little bit later and give us a complete roundup as to what's happening there. Take a look now at our picture of the day. This one comes from our producer, Linda Kutle Similani. This is that one that says, the entire road closed off. Kaya Sands protesters, if you can at all, avoid Witkoppen. Hashtag SABC News. Time to shift our focus now. We start in Europe, where the Times reports, it says thousands of protesters took to the streets of the Turkish capital to denounce the government and mourn the victims of the country's worst terrorist atrocity, as security sources named Islamic State as the probable attackers. Then moving to New York, the international New York Times reports that in parts of West Africa, religious retreats set up camps for people with mental illnesses where patients are frequently shackled and prayer is often the only treatment. Then finally, in China, the South China Morning Post reports that an airline based in southwest China has promised to stop bullying by members of its staff after new cabin crew were forced to lie in aircraft overhead luggage lockers. Kunming Airlines issued a statement saying it would stamp out the behavior immediately. Let's take a look now what's happening around the country today. Here in Johannesburg, where Czech fugitive Radovan Krejcir and his 5 co-accused were convicted of attempted murder, kidnapping and dealing in drugs. They are expected to be sentenced in the High Court. Then, also here in Johannesburg, judgment, of course, expected to be delivered in the trial of former Josie FM DJ Donald Sebolai, who was accused of murdering his girlfriend, Dolly Chabalala. Time for us to take a break now. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
SABC brings to you Rugby World Cup 2015.
What is beauty? Is it a view that's been waiting for you for centuries? A setting that gives you goosebumps when you see it for the first time? Is it a moment that stops you in your tracks and leaves you in awe? Some people spend their whole lives looking for it. When you open yourself up to it, suddenly you find yourself in a place where true beauty isn't something you'll ever see. Because when you meet South Africa, you'll reconsider what you think you know.
Welcome back. The war between Palestine and Israel, began in the late 19th century and early 20th century, and today the conflict seems to be never-ending. Internationally renowned and award-winning Israeli journalist and author Amira Hass is recognized for her reporting on Palestinian affairs in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, where she also lived for a number of years. Before working for Israeli left-wing and workers' rights advocacy groups, Hass began her career reporting on the Romanian Revolution in 1989. Now, Amira Hass has been working for Haaretz ever since as their frontline female correspondent and columnist. This week, she will be traveling around South Africa to talk about her life and her work. Now, we are privileged to have the award-winning journalist and author Amira Hass in our studio this morning. Very welcome to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
You started reporting on Israeli affairs in 1991, and from what I gather is at that point you noticed the lack of coverage on Israeli and Palestinian affairs. So many years on, do we still see that same level of apathy within the coverage?
I started covering occupation affairs, not Israeli affairs, because I write for an Israeli paper, and of course, Israeli paper knows everything about Israel, but doesn't know about the occupation. So what I did is covering the Israeli occupation in Gaza Strip. And that's indeed when I discovered that so little is known. Until today, the people do not want to know. It's not a question. The poor coverage is deliberate. People do not want to know about the institutional privileges of Israelis connected to the occupation. They don't want to know, so they don't read. They only know when Palestinians are angry and attacking and demonstrating.
That's very interesting, a very, very, very interesting perspective. How does that affect you as a journalist in the way that you try and tell stories?
I write and tell about the reality, and we have relative freedom of press and freedom of expression in Israel, mostly for Jews, but people do not have. We have the freedom, but people do not have the duty. We have the freedom to exercise the right, but the people don't have the duty to know what I write. So that's a problem, of course, but I think Israel is not unique in that sense. Any privileged class doesn't like to read about its privileges and about the violence inherent in the privileges to the few.
Yeah, in South Africa, we have a very strong movement called Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions against Israel, and they talk about Israeli apartheid towards the Palestinian people, and they cite the fact that there are walls up and the similarities between the two systems. Do you agree with that kind of sentiment?
I think that there are large similarities, and I do use the term apartheid to describe the Israeli regime all over, not only in the West Bank.
Yeah.
There are differences. There are differences. For example, there is no the biological racism that you experienced here until 25 years ago. You go to Israeli hospitals and you find Palestinian doctors and Palestinian patients side by side with Jewish patients and doctors. This is something you would not have had here. But the basic as the different unequal path of development for both peoples, or for both peoples, for Palestinians and Jews, is the main description to Israeli policy. The different and unequal path of development.
Yeah.
So Palestinians systematically are discriminated against.
I want to talk about the people, because in the end it's about people. Do you get a sense at both sides that there's an element of people being tired of conflict and tired of war and just wanting to live simply?
People, when you talk about Palestinians, Palestinians are first of all tired of the occupation. And Palestinians are first of all tired of Israeli policies, of expulsion, of demolition, of houses, of disconnecting Palestinians from each other, of concentrating Palestinians in enclaves, reservations, or Bantustans, if you want. So people are tired of this. People are tired of a language of peace which disguises a reality of occupation. The Israelis are tired of being reminded of this, in general. And now we are in a phase where the two sides are, the Palestinian side is showing in demonstrations all over the place, and also in individual attacks against Israeli Jews. People show that they are tired of it. And Israelis think that they are being attacked and that they are the victims, the Israeli Jews.
As a woman working on the front lines all these years, what are some of the heart-wrenching stories, some of the things that affected you so much it changed your world almost?
Well, it didn't reach that stage, and I hope it wouldn't. Of course, the wars against Gaza were some of the most difficult experiences. I managed to enter Gaza after the first war because we Israeli Jewish journalists were not allowed into Gaza since 2006. So I managed sometimes to enter without a permit. It was difficult. And I did manage to enter once after the war in 2008, 2009. I spent almost 5 months in Gaza again. And I interviewed people and victims of the attacks. And I can tell you that every day I would go back to my friend's place where I stayed, and I would feel as if I was working in a coal mine for 20 hours. That difficult it was. And still, I think I'm still haunted by the stories and testimonies that I heard from people over there.
That's amazing. You're going to be in South Africa for a little bit of time. Just tell us where can people connect with what you'll be doing here?
I'm invited by institution of AMEC and by Open Shuhada Street Group, and I will be speaking in several, here in Johannesburg in several places, and in Durban and Cape Town and some other places. I don't even remember. It's a very heavy schedule. But I guess people can Google and find it if they Google AMEC, A-M-E-C.
Thank you very much for joining us. Amira Hass is an award-winning journalist and author. She's here in South Africa, well, to talk about her work, really. Should be very, very interesting. You should have a look. Google it, is what she says. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, Parliament must decide whether South Africa should withdraw from the International Criminal Court. This after the ANC's National General Council passed a resolution for the country to leave the court. Government has been widely criticised for ignoring an order to arrest Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir when he attended a conference in Johannesburg in June of this year. There have been quite a few comments coming in on social media around this. Let's have a look at one officer. Nagist says, I personally am not against South Africa withdrawing from the ICC. Dave says, I support the ANC stance on the International Criminal Court. An unfair court is worse than mass murders, terrorists and warlords, says Dave. Musaba Kangulu says, is the ANC withdrawal from the ICC a ploy to reignite people's belief in the ANC once again? No, it's not, Musaba. Those are some of the views coming in on social media. Keep it coming. Now, let's take a look at what's happening on Newsroom Facebook page today. Thousands of members of the Association of Mine Workers and Construction Union have voted overwhelming for a strike in the gold mining sector. And Chris, about 35,000 paid-up members in the sector, and millions of Guineans voted peacefully yesterday in the West African country's second free election since independence from France nearly 60 years ago. And exit polls in Belarus showed President Alexander Lukashenko winning a fifth term by a landslide yesterday in elections that could see an easing in relations with the West and raise questions about his ties to Vladimir Putin's Russia. This is Newsroom. We'll be back with you after a short little break.
Your destiny is not determined by the township you come from.
The one place we will find movers and shakers is in the township. It's just that they're diamonds in the rough and some of them don't even know it.
Being young with no experience in business is a challenge that Bulelani took upon himself.
I was motivated by the prayer. I was motivated by the love.
To be a novice in business was tough, but experience made him a businessman of note.
It took me 7 years to make my first million. I've got all the scars to prove that I started with nothing.
A journey well traveled.
For me, that is the one major thing. The ability to touch other people's lives. Nothing goes beyond that.
Join your host Puleng Mulebati on Bopilong every Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
SABC brings to you Rugby World Cup 2015.
Welcome back. Now, according to the South African Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, obesity levels are increasing, and with it, there's an increase in non-communicable diseases. The prevalence of overweight and obesity combined is at 65% for females and 31% for males in South Africa. This week, of course, is National Nutrition Week here in South Africa. It aims to focus on eating healthily in the workplace. Now, joining us today is the spokesperson for the Department of Health here in South Africa, Poncho Sepelwane. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Evan. Good morning.
The focus of National Nutrition Week this year is on the workplace, I see. Yes. What did your studies find about what's happening in the workplace then?
Well, what is happening currently in the workplace is so alarming, is that our workplaces are not conducive for employees to make enabling, to make healthy choices. For example, there are barriers whereby when you want to go to vending machines or during meetings, we are unable to get healthy options. As a result, we see an increase of risk for low productivity in the workplace of around 66%, which is a concern. So generally, our workplaces are not really conducive for us to make healthy choices.
How do we get our employers to kind of buy into or to get on side with this? Because it's a simple thing of making the options available, isn't it?
Very simple. For me, it's actually something that can be done even today. I think the employers need to know the benefits of making the work site healthy in terms of productivity. If you're an employer, you want to have profit into your company, and you can only get that when your employees are healthy and productive and they don't necessarily are absent at work. So I think the first thing is for employers just to check what are the low-hanging fruits. Yeah. You go to your vending machines, you place healthy options, healthy beverages. Those are easy steps. And currently in the Department of Health, we've started even making changes in the meals we serve in meetings. Those are simple steps. Instead of having to serve a lot of meals, like a lot of meats and starches in your meetings, you omit, you eliminate some of the extra portions. Yeah. And that saves money even to the employers.
Most canteens that you walk into, you'll see almost every day is like a Sunday lunch type of spread that's out, and that's what you get here. With us, it's subsidized a little bit at the SABC, but is that big, heavy meal in the middle of the day the best thing for productivity?
Definitely not. An individual needs a certain amount of energy to be productive. I'm going to be a bit technical, but an individual needs about 6,500 kilojoules a day. So usually the variety that you see with large portions in your canteens, when a person consumes them at a time, they exceed the energy levels they need. And energy levels, they're not necessarily good energy because most of the food are high in fat, which will become sluggish. So it's not necessarily good for us to have that wide range. But on the other side, we encourage variety of food. Variety meaning you have to have plenty of vegetables and fruit, but the way you prepare vegetables is also quite important. And even the variety of meats that we're encouraging, the way you prepare it is also quite important. So the main thing is for you to portion your food with caution whilst trying to eat variety.
What's your advice to the individuals who battle with this kind of thing and we don't really have the options? Is it a question we have to take responsibility ourselves and bring that food from home?
Yes, definitely. I think bringing food from home is the best and safest choice. And you have and it's easy because you have control on what gets into your lunchbox. So you can definitely advise individuals to take and bring lunchboxes to home. And I always say, now we've been experiencing heat waves and people want to quench their thirst. The biggest, safest beverage of choice is water.
Yes.
You can never go wrong with water. So those are the key things that would encourage individuals to go for in order to lead a healthy life.
Well, I thank you for joining us. It is concerning. The numbers are certainly very concerning. But it's National Nutrition Week, and the employers have a responsibility to make healthy options available to all its employees. It's not so difficult.
It's not,
thank you.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. That's the spokesperson of the Department of Health, Poncho Sepulwan. She joined us here in our studio in Johannesburg this morning. Time now for us to get a weather update from Tsietse, Paul Munare.
Welcome from the weather desk. Okay, a couple of weather headlines to look out for. First of all, of course, the heat wave that we're expecting in South Africa, some droughts, and then eco-mobility is just something a little bit lighter in terms of trying to save the planet there and keeping our carbon footprint at a much lower level than it is. The weather for today, there is that heat wave that I mentioned and possibility of veld fires. Also accelerated or increased risk of droughts that we're expecting over South Africa. Most are affected are the Eastern Cape province as well as into some parts of KwaZulu-Natal. That way we're going to have serious water shortages. For your weather, there's up to 60 or rather 30% chance of rain expected towards that northeastern interior for today. And tomorrow we're seeing a spread of showers moving all the way towards the northern parts of Southern Africa. Botswana, Namibia, definitely you should expect some rain for tomorrow. Otherwise, clear skies are expected for much of the west with partly cloudy skies along the coastal regions. Your temperatures still fairly high for most parts. It goes to about the mid-30s for Gauteng as well as over the northwest province. Then some sunny skies are expected for the northwest for today. Tomorrow it's going to get a bit cloudy. Possibilities of showers towards Mpumalanga as well as over the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal. Sunny skies for the Western Cape province going all the way towards the Western Coast District as temperatures go into about 20s for Port Nolloth as well as over Alexander Bay. It gets very hot for Windhoek and Keetmanshoop into the mid-30s. Further towards the northern parts of Namibia, do expect even hotter conditions. Places such as Oshakati going as high as 37 degrees. Rundu is at 38. And moving into Botswana, you'll see partly cloudy skies just along the western half. By tomorrow, those clouds will have built up and there'll be a chance of rain. 40 for Maun, Khansi is at 38 degrees. Francistown also into those upper 30s. Hot weather all throughout southern Africa into Bulawayo, Maswingo. Those are into the mid-30s. Sunny skies are expected for the northern parts. A bit of clouds and now a bit of a relief for Beitbridge. Yesterday it was 40 degrees, so now it has dropped by 7 degrees to just around the 33. Still quite hot, but it's a lot better. Kuamba 34 Lichinga, sunny skies, also nothing has changed here. And then a bit of clouds also returning to Maputo. Yesterday there was some rain. Today we're not expecting much. Even tomorrow it will be a bit clearer. Temperatures are expected to be into the lower 30s with those clouds. Also expected for Tolanaro going up north along the coast of Madagascar. And you see over the northern parts, that's where temperatures start to increase up to around 33 to 34 degrees. That's where I'll leave it for the weather, but do stay tuned. There'll be more news here on SABC News.
Don't go.
Oh, yeah?
I wanted to ask you something.
Yeah?
The Waterberg. I see there are lots of fires burning in the Waterberg. Are they all under control now?
Yeah, well, not exactly. I mean, the heat conditions that we're experiencing and also the winds, that's what's making it a little bit worse because we're expecting around, or we're having about 40 kilometers an hour wind speed. Even here in Johannesburg, we have about 30 to 32. So, yeah, the winds, they lead to the spreading of those veld fires.
Yeah, so it's a little bit breezy. But what's your advice to people? You know, it's always people that start these fires, whether you like to admit it or not. What's your advice to people? What's the thing that we shouldn't do to start fires, especially at this dry part of the year?
Yeah, well, number one, looking out for things like such as bottles, just in the veld. Do not litter because littering usually leads to papers, with the bottles as well, and stompies. Just flicking it outside of your car while driving.
That is a big thing here in South Africa, the stompies.
Also, braais. Make sure your braais are controlled. You can put on the fire outside on your little braai stand and then just go into the house. And then the wind will blow a piece of sparks into the open veld and that could start a fire.
And the heat wave. Which day this week is the heat wave going to end? Come now.
That's a difficult one. I would I would never put an exact date on that one. But sometime this week, let's look for tomorrow and Wednesday.
Non-committal. Well, while we're watching at beautiful pictures of the coast, the heat wave here in Johannesburg is causing havoc in the northern parts of the city. This is Cape Town, of course, iconic Table Mountain there. That is the Makana, I think. Yes, that's a ferry on the way to Robben Island, sharing these wonderful pictures with you.
Have you been on one?
Yeah, I have. I've been to the island a few times, actually.
Yeah.
I quite enjoyed going there, to be honest. But, Tietze, thank you. You'll be back a little bit later with another update?
Yeah, sure. I'll be right back.
We'll be bringing us the good news with the weather, hopefully. Hopefully it will rain sometime later this week. We're going to be back with you at the top of the hour with a news update. See you then.
This is Rights and Recourse.
This act says we are all the same, we are all equal before the law.
I have a fundamental problem with her saying that traditional leaders are recognized as the de facto owners of the land. That isn't in the Constitution, nor is it in any law.
Unpacking your legal rights and cost of action.
The Constitution starts from the point that we are one country and that we need to have a system that actually consolidates that, but also recognizes the different compositions of different communities.
With respect to Aninka, I know she is happy that her queen in England, she's the owner of the whole land, she's not having any politics.
Chief Mokoena, we will get to some of the other issues.
You must withdraw that Aninka's Queen of England. Please, that's completely unacceptable.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays at 2 p.m. on the SABC News channel.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News channel.
Your destiny is not determined by the township you come from.
The one place we will find movers and shakers is in the township. It's just that they're diamonds in the rough and some of them don't even know it.
Being young with no experience in business is a challenge that Bulelani took upon himself.
I was motivated by the prayer. I was motivated by the love.
To be a novice in business was tough, but experience made him a businessman of note.
It took me 7 years to make my first million. I've got all the scars to prove that I started with nothing.
A journey well traveled.
For me, that is the one major thing. The ability to touch other people's lives. Nothing goes beyond that.
Join your host Puleng Mulebati on Bophelong every Saturday at 5:30 p.m.
It is important for everyone to know food safety practices and make sure that their food is prepared safely from farm to the plate.
Who ensures that there's compliance?
In terms of all the abattoirs, they have to be registered. So when they are being registered, they are actually audited fully to make sure that the structural requirements as well as the hygiene requirements are met.
Most bacteria and viruses cannot withstand the normal cooking temperatures that we use to cook our food.
The bigger retailers cannot be seen as being insensitive to the food safety requirements.
There are many consumers that actually go shopping with a cooler box and ice packs so that they don't break the cold chain, because a few hours outside the temperature that it should be already shortens the shelf life of that product.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories.
Stand by. All systems ready. Three, two, one.
A very good morning to you. This is the second hour on Newsroom. Welcome to the second hour. My name is Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. We are broadcasting live from our Auckland Park studios here in Johannesburg to the rest of the African continent. You have to stay with us. Let's now take a look at all your headlines. The African National Congress has made a renewed call for unity at the closing of the National General Council in Midrand. Counting has begun in Guinea's capital shortly after polling stations closed last night. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan faces mounting anger over the country's worst attack that killed 97 people at the weekend. Now, those were all your news headlines, but first, let's hear it from our sports anchor, Kendall Makamate.
Well, thank you very much, Everett. So we're going to take a quick look at what we expect to see in terms of the sports for this particular bulletin. Now, the first up, you will have the very first shot, which show us exactly what to expect today.
Point! Set!
The quarterfinal clashes emerge as the Thriller Minute Rugby World Cup signs off from the pool stages in what's already being billed as one of the more exciting World Cups in recent times. And Lewis Hamilton roars ever closer to a successful defense of his Drivers' Championship title, winning the Russian Grand Prix as teammate Nico Rosberg's car falters. There says Ferrari's Kimi Räikkönen receives a penalty demotion, giving Mercedes their second successive Constructors' Championship. A new star is on the rise for the Proteas as Kagiso Rabada holds his composure and steers the ship home with a fantastic final over in the first ODI against India since the World Cup Down Under. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. That's all coming up a little bit later, so you have to stay tuned for your sports news. But right now, let's take a look at your top story this hour. Hundreds of Kaya Sands residents have taken to the streets in Johannesburg this morning. The situation seems to be volatile as violence erupted at Eightfold Drive close to Witkoppen Road earlier. Residents say they want to hand over a memorandum to the MEC of Housing in Gauteng as they were promised better housing on land where the Lion Park in Johannesburg is situated. Now, to give us the latest, we are joined on the line by Johannesburg Metro Police spokesperson Wayne Minnaar. Mr. Minnaar, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much.
What is the latest?
Look, at this point, traffic is still being diverted away from Witkoppen Road at Bongwe between... that's at this point, traffic is not allowed onto that section of the road. There is a protest at this point in time, a protest march in place towards the Riverbend area where a memorandum will be handed over to the local councillor, and from there the protesters will then disperse. But we still want to discourage motorists from using Witkoppen Road as it's not safe. There was rocks placed on the road earlier. It has been cleared, but motorists are still advised to make use of the N1 as an alternative route for now.
For how long will the roads be closed?
Look, I envisage that it should be closed at least for the next 40 minutes, and then thereafter motorists will be allowed to use Witkoppen Road again.
Now, do you know if the MEC will address the residents today?
Look, at this point in time, we are escorting the protests to the area where they're going to be handing over the memorandum, and arrangements is being made for the appropriate individual to be receiving the memorandum as they want to do so.
Now, is there any arrest at this point in time?
No, there's been no arrest as yet. However, there are members from SAPS and JMPD on the scene attempting to contain the situation. The protesters were back off the road earlier, and at this point there are no protesters throwing stones. However, they are marching now to the area where they want to hand over the memorandum.
Mm-hmm. And injuries for any of the protesters, or was there anything that took place there?
As far as injuries are concerned, that I cannot confirm at this point.
Superintendent, thank you so much for your time. That was Wayne Menard, the Metro Police spokesperson, Senior Superintendent there, chatting to us. Now, the top story, the ANC has made a renewed call for unity at the closing of the National General Council in Midrand, north of Johannesburg in Gauteng. The party's president, Jacob Zuma, says the movement has resolved to mobilize all South Africans behind a vision of a non-racial country.
The song saying the day we returned, perhaps apt for the mission this organization wants to embark upon. In a frank assessment of its work, the ANC says it's putting corrective measures into place. First, reaffirming the centrality of its branches.
The branch is the basic unit of the ANC and the most important structure in the movement. It is in the branch that ANC members put to use their skills, energy, political insight, and experience in a program to transform society.
But the party knows it will have to do much to repair its image, from rooting out corruption to winning back its traditional support base.
Government should conduct a lifestyle audit for all employees of the state and its related entities.
The number of provinces is also said to be reviewed to strengthen government. The party has also urged full implementation on 50-50 gender principle. But the biggest headache for the ANC is next year's local government elections. Some metros are in danger of slipping out of their hands.
The NGC has noted the voting trends in the metros and that this requires the movement to review its strategies.
Delegates have described this NGC as the most successful. This NGC has seen a renewed sense of optimism from these delegates. But they know very well that optimism alone will not be sufficient. What is required is for them to go out and implement whatever they have agreed upon. Mzondi Limbeji, SABC News, Midrand.
Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma refuted reports that the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir will travel to South Africa in November. He made the statement as he sought to explain why South Africa has opted to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. This after the NGC of the ANC passed a resolution for the country to leave the court. It is now up to Parliament to decide whether South Africa should withdraw from the court. The government has been criticized for ignoring an order to arrest al-Bashir, who was indicted by the ICC when he attended a conference here in Johannesburg in June.
The NGC has taken a decision that the country should consider withdrawing from the ICC because it is unfair in the manner in which it has been dealing with things. Now, of course, the matter of the ICC in the continent of Africa is no longer a matter of individual country. It's a matter of the AU as an organization, that many of the countries are signatories to the ICC. There is a background to this. In the eyes of the African leaders is that the ICC is biased. It takes decisions, a particular decision, some of them, which are not necessarily justified at the end, on African leaders. For an example, African leaders who are discussing the issue, at one point, looking at their own issues and the manner in which to get rid of pockets of problems in the continent, when the warrant of arrest was issued for President Bashir, at that time, the negotiations to bring about peace in Darfur were at a very delicate stage, and Bashir was part of the stakeholders, and in the view of the AU, was that you needed him at that moment just to clinch the deal, and thereafter you could then deal with it. That if at that point you arrested him, you would actually scupper the process. And the AU as an organization took it upon itself to talk to the ICC to say, could you withdraw the warrant? We are not saying he should not be arrested for this moment, because we think we need him now to help bring about peace. They ignored it. They did not even worry about it. And the AU was worried. This is the first case. Worried, why are you not taking, what are you interested in? Are you interested in to bring about peace and stability in Sudan, or are you just interested in arresting Bashir? In terms of weighing these two, the leaders felt they don't worry about what happens to the question of peace and stability. They're more worried about arresting people. And they were not saying don't arrest. They were saying let it be arrested, but give us time.
Farmers in the Dordrecht and Jamestown areas of the Eastern Cape are counting their losses following a week of devastating veld fires. The fires have destroyed an estimated 20,000 hectares of grazing land and farmland. The Rural Development and Agrarian Reform Department is assessing the damage to determine how they can assist the farmers. Meanwhile, thousands of members of trade union AMCU have voted overwhelmingly for a strike in the gold mining sector. AMCU has about 35,000 paid-up members in the sector and is the second largest union after the National Union of Mine Workers. The union led a bruising 5-month strike last year in the platinum sector. However, AMCU will wait for the Labour Court's ruling on the union's 2013 appeal to strike before serving notices on Sibanye Gold, Anglo Gold, Ashanti and Harmony Gold. The country's gold producers, who are grappling with depressed prices and soaring costs, say they cannot afford the union's wage demand of 12,500 rand a month. The annual meetings of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund drew to a close in Lima, Peru. 12,000 people from around the globe received a crash course in global economics and how it might affect some of the 180-plus countries and regions represented at the meeting.
Financial leaders say economies may be in for some heavy weather. China's growth target this year is about 7% less than the double-digit figures of the past, but still well ahead of the global average. Even host nation Peru, once the economic star of the region, is feeling the squeeze. Like many other emerging economies, Peru could have done more during the boom.
This has been the longest, the most prolonged, and the deepest decline in our basket of commodity prices, the overall basket, in history probably, at least in the last 65 years.
Peru's goals coincide with those of many emerging economies and those set out by the World Bank. The World Bank president urged reforms to halt a backslide in record-low global poverty.
Our overarching strategy, based on more than 50 years of experience, is that 3 things must happen: inclusive economic growth, investment in human beings, and insurance against the risk that people might fall back into poverty. We summarize this in 3 words: grow, invest, insure.
However, it is not all doom and gloom. The IMF is still forecasting global growth at 3.1% this year. Economic leaders say the recovery will continue, but it's just going to be slower.
Counting has begun in Guinea's capital shortly after polling stations closed last night. The polls pitted the president, Alpha Condé, against his main rival, Cellou Dalein Diallo. Now, this is the second election in the West African country since its independence from France nearly 60 years ago. The 77-year-old Condé is widely expected to win a second mandate, although the results were expected to be close enough to require a second round against Diallo. Around a dozen people died during clashes in the run-up, and the opposition called for voting to be delayed because of fears about fraud. Some polling stations opened late, and there were complaints of lack of paperwork and officials arriving late in some of the polling stations. Turkey says 2 male suicide bombers carried out the devastating twin bombings this weekend in Ankara. 97 people were killed and scores injured in the deadliest attack in the history of modern Turkey. Meanwhile, thousands of mourners filled the streets of Ankara and vented their anger at President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Pro-Kurdish supporters scuffle with police near the scene of twin suicide attacks the day before, after they tried to push through a security barricade to lay down carnations. Saturday's blasts at a pro-Kurdish rally in the Turkish capital left nearly 130 killed and scores more wounded. Elsewhere in the mainly Kurdish southeastern city of Diyarbakir, police clash with protesters denouncing the attack. At the Ankara morgue, where bodies are still being identified, loved ones of those killed gathered to mourn their dead, their emotional wounds still raw. Survivors describe the gruesome attack, which some say was made worse by the authorities.
As we tried to carry the wounded away, police attacked us with tear gas canisters. And for about half an hour, we tried to run from the police that were preventing us from taking the wounded away. For almost 45 minutes, the wounded had to wait at the blast site. The ambulances did not come. They would not let the ambulance drive in.
The activists were protesting a recent flare-up in violence between security forces and the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the Kurdish southeast, which has left hundreds killed.
Now that's your local and international news for now. Kendall Makamate is up next with your sports news.
South Africa is the third leading country globally in TB infections.
We have 9 million new cases occurring globally, and 30% of those cases are occurring in the African region.
And there are two broad kinds of drug-resistant TB, so to speak. The one is MDR TB, and the other is XDR TB.
To ensure that everyone who's diagnosed with TB is tested for HIV.
There's grossly inadequate funding for TB. Vaccine, drug and diagnostic research. We need a lot more.
Join me on Health Talk every Saturday morning between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m. as we unpack current health stories.
SABC brings to you Rugby World Cup 2015.
Good morning and welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamat and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Now, the big story for this morning is the curtain was drawn on the pool stages at the Rugby World Cup, and what's emerged for the quarterfinals could not have been scripted better. Literally, all the way down the line, we've got North versus South, from New Zealand against France to South Africa against Wales. Now, to talk to me about this, as well as all the action from the weekend, we've got Jody Hendricks in studio with us again. Good morning and welcome back to Newsroom.
Kendall, good being here.
Jody, let's start with the very first thing, the matches from the weekend. We're looking at the All Blacks and how they performed. They've actually not been as smooth and as silky as we'd like them to be going into the quarters.
Not the best performance in any of the group stages. I think their first game against Argentina, they did well enough to get a victory there. They didn't get a bonus point. And I think, you know, a lot of, especially France now, will be meeting the All Blacks in the quarterfinal, will be looking at their performances in the group stages and think, you know, we might actually have a chance here.
Having said that, the All Blacks have been known to come up, cometh the hour. They're the team that actually brings the goods every single time.
Kendall, they're the defending world champions. They've got some of the best players in the world: Aaron Smith, Ben Smith, Dan Carter, Richie McCaw. The list goes on and on. So you can never write off the All Blacks. But like we said, their performances at the World Cup hasn't been that of what you'd expect of world champions. So a couple of aspects that they'll need to work on, especially at the breakdown and the handling, but never write off an All Black team.
What stood out for you most about that particular performance in their last match for the All Blacks?
Well, I think it was the interplay between the forwards and the backs. They always had a man over. Like I said, the areas that let them down was the handling, but once they get going, they're very difficult to stop, and they scored some awesome tries as well.
All right, now let's go through to the Ireland-France match, which was played last night. And these the winner of that match threw up who the quarterfinals match is going to be against for the All Blacks, and they're going to be playing France, as you've just mentioned. Having said that, France have always been a banana peel for the All Blacks going into the World Cup.
Yeah, Kendall, you can just look at the history between the All Blacks and France at Rugby World Cups, and it's very unpredictable. If you can remember 1999 when they came back, France came back in the second half, 2007 when that famous forward pass. So France always had the All Blacks number when it comes to Rugby World Cup. So I think it's going to be, that for me is probably going to be the quarterfinal of the coming weekend.
Those are big words because there are quite a few quarterfinals coming up, but it should be interesting to see what happens with All Blacks against France, considering that France themselves have not been as comprehensive as one would like them to be.
France, actually, for me last night was very disappointing against Ireland, and then again, we have to give credit to Ireland. Ireland came, they lost their fly-off Sexton in the, I think it was the 23rd minute. They lost their captain, Paul O'Connell, in the 40th minute. So they basically, the second half, and that was the part where they dominated France with their reserve players. So I think Ireland did well. And also the players that came in, Ian Madigan at fly-off, stood up, he took the kicking, you know, they scored some awesome tries. Rob Kearney at fullback, he came into the back line. And France had no answer to that. They subbed their star players, Michalak, Bastereau, all those players early in the second half. It showed that they had problems.
So what are you saying about Ireland and their chances? They are the current Six Nations champions. They did show their pedigree in that match against France. They actually outplayed them, squashed them, and they were almost like a second-string side.
I think now that we're at the business end of the Rugby World Cup, Ireland for me is probably going to be the team to watch. There's another team that I'll mention in a bit, but for me, Ireland, they've just proven to everybody, the All Blacks, South Africa, everybody, that they are forced to be reckoned with at this World Cup.
Well, talking about Ireland, they're going to be playing Argentina in their quarterfinal, because now that all the matches have been played in the pool stages, we now know exactly who's playing who. They're playing Argentina, and Argentina are definitely a team to watch. They've been doing extremely well over the last 2 years.
Well, we just have to go back to August in Durban when they beat the Springboks. So definitely not an easy team. It will be a difficult game, I think. Also with the inclusion in the Rugby Championships in 2012, their rugby's improved a lot. So I don't think it's going to be an easy game for Ireland. I think if Ireland play the way they did throughout this World Cup, I can't see Argentina beating them, but that should also be a cracker of a game.
Very interesting. And let's go through to the last one. South Africa is going to be playing against Wales. It's going to be an absolute humdinger in that particular one. Considering how Wales have been performing, it's not a shoe-in that the Boks are going to win this one, is it?
Well, I don't agree with you. I think the Boks should be the favourite for this game. You remember at the beginning of the World Cup that Wales lost a couple of key players. Yes, they beat England, but then they had a couple of easy games at the World Cup, and then they showed that they couldn't come up against Australia. So I think, you know, the key players, the loss of the key players for them could come back to haunt them in the big games like the quarterfinals, because your youngsters and your inexperienced players can only take you so far.
Talking about the Australia match and Wales not coming up with the goods, that much played at a high tempo. It was like a test match. It was so tight for the entire match. And it seems, and I would actually go back and disagree with you about Wales and their performances, because they've been able to actually stand toe-to-toe with the best in the world, considering, and don't forget, that Australia won the Rugby Championship this year.
I agree with you to a certain extent, but also the importance of a goal kicker, and that's, I think, was the difference in the Wales-Australia game. The Wales, Dan Biggar, he missed one where, you know, Bernard Foley was on song, and that was the difference between the two teams. And I said earlier that I think there's two teams in this knockout phases that's going to be a factor. Ireland is the one. Watch Australia.
All right, now let's have a look-see here. Now, we've got the graphic that we want to share with you at home. This is our road to the final. So right now, we've got the quarters. You know what, Jody, take us through this, the 4 different matches that are being played, and give us some predictions.
Also, first of all, if you'll notice that it's all Northern Hemisphere versus Southern Hemisphere teams, so 4 each, and that should be obviously the one missing that everybody thinks is the host nation, England. But I think South Africa, Wales, that's going to be a very important match for us. I think they're the captaincy of Fourie du Preez. Remember, this is the knockout stages. The year you can't lose a game, or bonus points won't matter at all for you. You've got to secure the win, and I think South Africa, the way they played against America in the last game, they should be the favourite in that game. If you go to the France-New Zealand game, that's a very tight game to call. I will think experience, I'll give it to New Zealand. Ireland, Argentina, Ireland on form, on song at the World Cup, they should be the favourite. And so I think Australia should just be too strong for Scotland.
Well, that said, let's go back to the South Africa-Wales one. We met Wales in the last World Cup. They beat us. Yes, the referee was involved. But having said that, that was controversial. But South Africa against the United States. The United States was a second-string side. By all accounts, the United States were holding off for their match against Japan, which they ended up losing last night. Anyway, so to say that South Africa's performance against the United States is something to use as benchmark for the Wales match? Is that it?
64-0 is what you'd have expected from a team like South Africa against a second-string team like the United States. And I think that was basically just preparation for the knockout phases. Remember, there was also, by the time South Africa played the USA, there was a lot of uncertainty. They could have played Australia if Wales was on song in their last group match. So South Africa didn't know who to expect. Luckily for us, I think luckily for us, we are now facing Wales. And I think Wales, they are a good team, and it's going to be difficult, but I'll give it to South Africa.
All right, cool. Now, New Zealand, France, you've given us how many points, New Zealand, France?
It's going to be tight, I think less than 7, Kendall.
Ireland, Argentina?
Ireland, I'll say Ireland by 10.
All right, Australia, Scotland?
I think that's probably the easiest of the quarterfinals at the World Cup. So I'll say, let's say Australia will take that by 15 plus points.
Fantastic. And then we get into the semi-finals where it could be anybody's game to take.
That's the interesting thing, that if South Africa win and New Zealand win, we could be facing New Zealand in a semi-final, which everybody would have hoped for, that we'd play them on Twickenham at the final. But like I said, we could also be facing Ireland in a possible final, and I think Ireland, if they go all the way, they're going to be very difficult to stop. Remember, they're close to England, and they will get a lot of home support as well.
No, very good. Jody, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on the road to the finals, where it's going to stand and what we can expect. We do expect to be talking to you again closer to when the quarterfinals get played. That's towards the end of this week.
Thanks, Kendall.
All right, now that was Jody Hendricks taking us through the road to the finals for the Rugby World Cup 2015. That's your sports in this hour. Newsroom will be back after the break.
Welcome back. Time for us to shift our focus to what is happening on the African continent. Now, yet another bid to prevent Rwanda's President Paul Kagame's third term in office has failed. The country's opposition party previously held protests demanding that Kagame must respect the constitution there. Now, last week, Rwanda's Supreme Court rejected an attempt by the main opposition party to block changes to the country's constitution.
Though he has not yet come out in public that he wants to run for a third term, President Kagame has made it clear that he is open to persuasion. During his term in office, Kagame has been hailed for rebuilding Rwanda after the genocide, in which 800,000 people, most of them Tutsis and moderate Hutus, were massacred. However, analysts believe that the court's decision poses a huge threat to the country's democracy.
Firstly, he's had 2 terms of 7 years each. That's a long time. Secondly, he is the one who actually approved the term limits in the Constitution and is now trying quite, I think, insidiously to overturn them through a seeming public endorsement of his policies. While he has done extremely well economically, the democratic space in Rwanda has increasingly been closed down over the last decade, and that is dangerous.
Term limits are a hot topic in Africa, after similar moves by other leaders in the region to bid for more time in power. Congo Republic is holding a referendum this month on constitutional changes that would allow 71-year-old President Denis Sassou Nguesso to extend his 31 years in power. Reforms include raising the maximum age for presidential candidates from 70. And in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, opposition parties have accused President Joseph Kabila, who has been in charge for 14 years, of plotting to extend his time in office via violence and manipulation of a packed electoral calendar. In Burundi, President Pierre Nkurunziza sparked months of protest and a failed coup in April when he decided to run for a third term after a controversial court ruling that the first of his 2 terms did not count because he was not directly elected. Africans have different opinions on what is now referred to as third-termism.
Sometimes he might know what is right for the country, but the people have the final say because it's their country, so it's their choice.
Yes, I think if a leader is doing a good job, there's no harm in his continuing, provided the people want him to continue. As long as he can stand for election again and win an election, signifying that the people want him, then there's no harm in being there for a longer time.
The international donors have criticized Kagame's suppression of opposition and any move to change the constitution.
Now, to discuss this, we are joined by African analyst Isaac Como with us this morning. Morning, Isaac. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and good morning to you too.
Interesting little insert that we saw there. Before I get into some of the merits of it, I wanted to ask you about your reaction to the judgment, and then what do you think the kind of precedent this kind of sets in West Africa?
Well, my reaction to the Constitutional Court, basically, Constitutional Courts are very important institutions, and they're going to be respected. But then it appears that the Constitutional Court did not actually look at all the tenets of the Constitution to make that judgment. That's according to a legal specialist from Rwanda, but we can talk about that later.
It's the precedent. What do you think the message that goes? We seem to be having a kind of third-term discussion here, not just in Rwanda, but around the African continent. What's not so much the precedent, but the message that it sends to African leaders?
You know, this is my personal view, and I would really start by quoting from Thabo Mbeki. In one of his lectures which he gave, he actually said that the issue of second term and 2 terms or whatever term, it is just a convention that people came and agreed to.
Yeah.
It has got nothing to do with democracy. The process of how you get the person there is democracy. So basically, if people think that they want to go more than 2 terms, it's up to the people to decide.
Yeah.
But another thing is this, that in development as a whole, you find that with development, what is really needed is that you need to have policies, development policies, which have got to be implemented over a long period of time. That's what happened to the Chinese, who were able to raise about 500 million people out of abject poverty. They actually had to have policies and leadership, and which were there for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Now, basically, there's got to be a continuity of policies. And that, again, talks to this thing of a continued
leadership role.
Yeah.
But what about, in my view, the West has been rather quiet on this specific case. How do you view this silence? How do you read it, rather?
That's the most dangerous thing, and there's a thing that people do not see. First of all, let's talk about the contradiction which is around the third term.
Yeah.
According to the opposition, that's the external opposition, because the internal opposition cannot come. The external opposition says that, according to the constitution of Rwanda, there is a clause 101, which says, under no circumstances can the issue of the third term, of the 2 terms, be changed. And again, they've got another clause of 193, which talks about how the constitution can be changed. But they say that under no circumstances actually also informs the process itself. You cannot actually come and include, But what has happened is that the Rwandan government has gone beyond that under no circumstances. Yeah.
You don't,
but
just to finish the view of the West, you don't think there's a level of double standards being applied?
Yeah, there's a lot of it, because I mean to say that let's take 2 countries, Rwanda and Uganda.
Yeah.
Uganda, they long changed the third term.
Yeah.
And the West has said nothing. In fact, those are the node countries of the USA. They get a lot of USA aid and also military aid under the guise of peacekeeping.
Yeah.
But then you find that in the case of the DRC, where Kabila, he actually sort of mooted the issue of actually changing the 2 terms. He never changed it. He talked about opening a discussion around it. There were protests, but the most important thing is this, that the U.S. aid was involved in mobilizing the civil society in the DRC. They actually planned meetings. They flew in people from Senegal to organize the meeting, funded the radio stations. But now why is the U.S. aid, the Americans, actually sort of behaving in such a manner? And they did the same thing in Burundi.
Yeah.
So you find that certain countries, when they talk about the third term, they are being allowed, it's just a slight condemnation.
Yeah.
But other terms, there's actually active involvement in the whole issue. So people are asking really, where does the West stand with some of these issues?
Yeah, what is the agenda? What is the objective?
What's the objective?
But,
exactly.
But what happens is that this kind of thing really affects the people in those countries. It affects their day-to-day lives. You see flare-ups and violence and all those sorts of things. When we deal with Rwanda, do you think we're going to now see, now President Kagame, he hasn't said yet that he's going to run for a third term. I suppose it's a matter of time that, but when you look at the on the ground, do you expect Rwanda to go down the same path as Burundi?
It will never go the same path, because basically the liberal democracy of Rwanda, there's no liberal democracy. The country is very tight. Yeah, the Burundi it had a very liberal constitution, which gave a lot of room for opposition and also for democracy, for people to express themselves. That space in Rwanda is very tight. People are saying Rwanda, it's a miracle, it's an economic miracle. Yeah. But when it comes to the democratic and governance, the liberal, the democratic governance is very tight, and it's not. We could not say that there's room for opposition members. As the opposition say that about 36,000 people have already disappeared quietly in Rwanda under Kagame. And not only that, it's on record that journalists have been assassinated. Yeah. Opposition members who are very vocal have been jailed. But that is not even come in the radar of the mainstream media and also of the Western countries.
Yeah, it seems as if, some things are very difficult to come. But Isaac, thank you for joining us. Very interesting. We'll look at Rwanda over the next couple of weeks and see how it develops there. I hope that you're right and it don't go down that route. But thank you for joining us.
Thank you
today. That's African analyst, Channel Africa senior producer Isaac Homer joining us to talk about a third term for President Kagame. Now we move on. Uber Technologies is negotiating cheaper deals for new vehicles with Kia Motors to boost its number of drivers by up to 5-fold in the Nigerian city of Lagos. The U.S. car booking company has signed agreements with the South Korean car maker and Lagos-based Access Bank to reduce the down payment required for new vehicles. Now, since Uber launched in Lagos just over a year ago, more than 600 new job opportunities have been created using the application. Now, for more on this story, we're joined by the General Manager of Uber in Nigeria, Ebi Etawodi. A very good morning to you, Ebi. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, morning, Evan. How are you?
Very good today. Thank you very much. Just tell us, how is Uber faring in Nigeria?
Very well. We're extremely excited about the growth that we've seen and the take-up that we've seen both on the partner side as well as the rider side in Lagos.
Tell us about this deal that you've struck with Kia Motors. What do you think is going to mean immediately on the ground in the city?
I think a couple of things. So one is ultimately when you have more cars on the road, you're getting a more efficient system. So at the moment, we have average ETAs in Lagos of around 8 minutes. The goal is to bring that number down to 3 minutes or 2 minutes. When you have more cars on the road, you have a more efficient system, which ultimately leads to people being able to move around their city more efficiently. But beyond that, you've got the job creation opportunities that come from it. Kia also happens to assemble cars locally in Nigeria, so there's also job opportunities created from that avenue. And then, of course, you've got the innovation that this will bring. So we're making a smart city where people are able to get around, again, take out all of those inefficiencies. And in some cases, you're having drivers using a smartphone for the first time. So there's so many facets.
Well, now that you're going to put more vehicles on the roads in Lagos, first, What's the reaction been like here in South Africa, elsewhere in the world? The reaction towards Uber have been somewhat negative. We've seen attacks and assaults and all these kinds of things here in South Africa. Are you seeing a future where you'll be battling the same kind of resistance from, say, the meter taxi associations?
I think Lagos, one thing I'll give to the government here is that we have a very forward-thinking, very innovative government. So cashless, for example, is something that the Lagos state pioneered, which, of course, is one of the core tenets of Uber, having a cashless platform in Lagos. I think another important one is that actually when you have a car that instead of taking sort of one person to and from a location, you're now increasing utilization of that vehicle. You're actually taking more cars off the road, and congestion is a huge part of Lagos and most metro cities, and that's something that we're hoping to alleviate. So we've been working very closely with a lot of key players in this industry and a lot of key players in the government here. The reception has been quite exceptional, I have to say, from the finance institutions to actually some of the bodies in the sports space. And we look to doing together, creating more job opportunities, ultimately creating a smarter city.
Well, I think we're starting to lose the line a little bit there, Abby. Can you hear me 100%?
I can hear you 100%.
Okay.
You hear me?
Okay, fantastic. Just tell us quickly about your business, marketing, attracting customers, reaction from customers, and so forth with the service there in the last year or so.
So from about July to March in Lagos, we saw a 200x growth on the rider side. That's quite exponential. And within that time to date, that number is multiplied by another 4x. So the growth has been quite exceptional. I think another important thing is that you're now bringing people into a space that hitherto was predominantly, you call a driver, the driver comes and picks you up and drives about 30 minutes. And now you have people being able to get around the city like never before in a matter of, getting a car in a matter of minutes. So the growth has been quite exponential. We've, again, worked with a number of key partners here. Kia is one of them, bringing, cheaper cars to some of the partners on the road. Axis Bank bringing financing opportunities. But beyond that, there are other partners that we've worked with who are also sort of saying to their be it, from the mobile carriers to actually device manufacturers to more banks, saying to people, you can now get around using your mobile phone and getting a car in a couple of minutes. And when you consider that over 50% of the population here in Nigeria is under 18, you have people who are going to be moving into, their 20s and 21-year-olds very soon, who need to, go for a job interview, who need to get to work, run their lives, and they can now do it like never before. They can now move around the city with the Uber platform.
Well, Abby, thank you for joining us this morning. That is the General Manager of Uber in Nigeria, Abby Etawodi, talking to us about the challenges facing Uber and also the fact that they are going to increase the number of vehicles on the roads in Lagos town. That is exponentially over the next couple of weeks, and that's in an unprecedented deal with Korean car maker Kia Motors. Now, we shift our focus elsewhere. Millions of Guineans took to the polls yesterday in the West African country's second free election since the country's independence from France. That is now nearly 60 years ago. Although Guinea has a history of election violence linked to ethnic tensions, the voting process was largely peaceful. Joining us now on the line from Guinea is the Africa practice consultant, Alexandre Branning. A very good morning to you, Alexandre. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Alex, just give us a sense of the atmosphere, what it was like at the voting stations yesterday.
So after last week, which was quite tense and during which violent clashes occurred between the supporters of President Alpha Condé and the opposition, the voting day yesterday was relatively peaceful on the whole. People were quietly waiting in line in country, and no major incidents were recorded either in the capital or in the rest of the country.
Now, what are the early indicators now that voting has started? Is Alpha Conde out front? Is he out in front, or is it a little bit closer than what we've been led to believe it was going to be?
So there aren't any indications at all with regards to the results as we speak. Provisional results are due to be published within 72 hours, but until then we won't be able to know who is in front. What's quite clear is that Alpha Conde is the likely favorite to win the election and to be re-elected. And this will create potentially controversy because the opposition, as soon as polling stations closed yesterday night, announced that there had been issues in the electoral process and in the voting processes, and that as such they would most likely not recognize the results.
Are we going to see a second round of polling? And if this is the case, do you expect this to cause some sort of flare-ups?
I think that if Alpha Conde wins in the first round, it's the scenario which has the most risk for political violence, due to a simple fact, which is that the opposition believes that it is mathematically impossible for Alpha Conde to win in the first round. Therefore, if he does win in the first round, they will most likely ask their supporters to take the streets to protest. Now, if there is a second round and Alpha Conde does not win an absolute majority, more than 50% of the vote in the first round, then potentially I imagine that in the coming weeks and in the coming days, the level of tension will be less significant, and Alpha Conde's potential re-election will be somewhat more acceptable for the opposition.
When do we expect final results to be in, Alexandre?
So the final results for the first round are expected this week. And if there is a second round, it will be held 14 days after the publication of the final first round results. So that should take us towards the end of the month of October or the beginning of November. So by the beginning of November, we will know who is the new president of Guinea.
Well, thank you for that update. Alexandre Brenning is an Africa practice consultant. He's in Guinea at the moment, monitoring the elections, giving us an update on the day today, the day after the election there. That's the news from the continent for now. We come back to South Africa now, where government and health shareholders are calling for easier access to morphine. This emerged at Hospice's Palliative Care Association conference, which was held in Durban earlier this month. Now, morphine is a safe, effective and cheap treatment for pain, yet many people don't have access to it. World Health Organization estimates that 70% of cancer patients experience severe pain during the course of their disease because they do not have access to cheap and effective pain medication. Now, currently in South Africa, the prescription of the drug is regulated by Section 56 of the Nursing Act, that's Act 33 of 2005, which means only doctors and pharmacists can prescribe the drug. Well, now, from our studios in Durban, we are joined by Zodwa Sitolu, who is the Public Affairs Manager from Hospice Palliative Care Association of South Africa. Now, we also tried, contacting the Innovative Pharmaceutical Association of South Africa, but they declined, unfortunately, citing the sensitivity of the issue. Very good morning to you. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Evan.
Tell me, why are you calling for morphine to be allowed to be administered now by nurses? What's your view on this?
I think, Evan, I must start by saying that the essence of palliative care is the relief of suffering. When you look at the basic human needs, the pain relief will always be on the top of that list. And again, it is important to point out that palliative care is a human right. And it is cruel and also a form of torture, failure to act to relieve patients' pain. There is inadequate access of palliative care and pain relief. And when, unfortunately, our patients, palliative care patients, some of them, they cannot go to the health facility, so they rely on home visits. When our palliative care nurse trained on palliative care, visiting them at home, who can help them to meet those unmet needs. And I mean, if the law can allow the nurses, palliative care trained nurses, to prescribe all the scheduled drugs, that will improve the access to palliative care and access to pain relief, and which is in line with the World Health Assembly resolution, which was adopted like last year, May 2014. And the resolution is urging all the countries to make sure the adequate supply of all the essential palliative care drugs and the improvement of pain medication, palliative care medication. So that's why we are advocating for the nurses to be able to prescribe and dispense morphine.
What about controlling the drug, making sure that it don't end up in the wrong hands, that we don't have issues with abuse? What is your view? How do we manage that process?
Even the risk of misuse is already there. I mean, but when you look at the medical practitioner, there are safeguards which control the use of strong opioids. So the same safeguards will control the use of morphine by the palliative care trained nurses. And again, you know, both will rely on good patients' history taking, and also you'll also rely on history, as I've just said, history taking, and also proper diagnosis of pain and correct prescription of the pain medication.
And
again, it is even, can I just say something? Yes. Again, the register is there already with whoever is who's dispensing that Schedule 6 medication to enter the drugs and the name of the patient, and that register can be scrutinized by the Medicine Control Council as a measure of controlling the morphine.
And in your discussions with health department stakeholders, what are they saying with your push for easy access now?
I must say we are working very close with the Department of Health. We had our annual conference 2 weeks ago where we invited the Minister of Health to close our conference. And one of the things he mentioned was the importance of having the national palliative care policy and guidelines, and he promised that he will fast track that with the Department of Health, which have already started working on it. So our belief, once we have the national palliative care policy, those issues of inadequate access to essential palliative care drugs will be addressed.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. That is Zodwa Sitole. She's the Public Affairs Minister from Hospice Palliative Care here in South Africa. Thank you once again. Well, time now for us to get a quick weather update with Tsiatsi Monare.
To look out for. First of all, of course, the heat wave that we're expecting in South Africa, some droughts, and then eco-mobility is just something a little bit lighter in terms of trying to save the planet there and keeping our carbon footprint at a much lower level than it is. The weather for today, there is that heat wave that I mentioned and possibilities of veld fires also accelerated or increased risk of droughts that we're expecting over South Africa. Most are affected are the Eastern Cape province as well as into some parts of KwaZulu-Natal. That way we're going to have serious water shortages. For your weather, there's up to 60 or rather 30% chance of rain expected towards the northeastern interior for today and tomorrow. We're seeing a spread of showers moving all the way towards the northern parts of southern Africa. Botswana, Namibia, definitely you should expect some rain for tomorrow. Otherwise, clear skies are expected for much of the west with partly cloudy skies along the coastal regions. Your temperatures still fairly high for most parts. It goes to about the mid-30s for Gauteng as well as over the northwest province. Then some sunny skies are expected for the northwest for today. Tomorrow it's going to get a bit cloudy. Possibilities of showers towards Mpumalanga as well as over the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal. Sunny skies for the Western Cape province going all the way towards the Western Coast District as temperatures go into about 20s for Port Nolloth as well as over Alexander Bay. It gets very hot for Windhoek and Keetmanshoop into the mid-30s. Further towards the northern parts of Namibia, do expect even hotter conditions. Places such as Oshakati going as high as 37 degrees. Rundu is at 38. And moving into Botswana, you'll see partly cloudy skies just along the western half. By tomorrow, those clouds will have built up and there'll be a chance of rain. 40 for Maun, Khansi is at 38 degrees. Francistown also into those upper 30s. Hot weather all throughout southern Africa into Bulawayo, Maswingo. Those are into the mid-30s. Sunny skies are expected for the northern parts. A bit of clouds and now a bit of a relief for Beitbridge. Yesterday it was 40 degrees, so now it has dropped by 7 degrees to just around 33. Still quite hot, but it's a lot better. Kuamba 34 Lichinga, sunny skies. Also nothing has changed here. And then a bit of clouds also returning to Maputo. Yesterday there was some rain. Today we're not expecting much. Even tomorrow it will be a bit clearer. Temperatures are expected to be into the lower 30s with those clouds. Also expected for Tolanaro going up north along the coast of Madagascar. And you see over the northern parts, that's where temperatures start to increase up to around 33 to 34 degrees. That's where I'll leave it for the weather, but do stay tuned. There'll be more news here on SABC News.
Yeah, thank you very much to Tsetsi Munari. He'll be back with a final update a little bit later. Time for us to go to a break. When we come back, top of the hour news with Elvis Presley.
Get behind Rugby World Cup 2015 on SABC.
Stand by. All systems ready. Three, two, one.
This is Rights and Recourse.
This act says we are all the same, we are all equal before the law.
I have a fundamental problem with her saying that traditional leaders are recognized as the de facto owners of the land. That isn't in the Constitution, nor is it in any law.
Unpacking your legal rights and cost of action.
The Constitution starts from the point that we are one country and that we need to have a system that actually consolidates that, but also recognizes the different compositions of different communities.
With respect to Aninka, I know she is happy that her queen in England, she's the owner of the whole land, she's not having any politics.
Chief Mokoena, we will get to some of the other issues.
You must withdraw that Aninka's Queen of England. Please, that's completely unacceptable.
That's Rights and Recourse, Sundays at 2 p.m. on the SABC News channel.
100 hours Central Africa time on this Monday, the 12th of October 2015. This is Newsroom. We are broadcasting live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. You have to stay with us as we bring you the latest news from here and around the globe. I'm Elvis Preston, your host until 12 o'clock, and coming up in the next hour. The African National Congress has made a renewed call for unity at the closing of the National General Council in Midrand. Counting has begun in Guinea's capital shortly after polling stations closed last night. And Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan faces mounting anger over the country's worst attack that killed 97 people at the weekend. Those are all your headlines, but first, let's hear it from our sports anchor, Kendall Makamate, the latest. A very good morning to you, Kendall.
Good morning, Elvis, and good morning to everyone else at home. Basically, what you can expect in your sports today is we're going to take a quick look at what's happening in the sports. So we've got the quarterfinal clashes, which emerged as a thriller-minute Rugby World Cup, signs off on the pool stages, and what's already being billed as one of the more exciting World Cups in recent times.
His third title.
And Lewis Hamilton rose ever closer to a successful defense of his Drivers' Championship, winning the Russian Grand Prix as teammate Nico Rosberg's car falters, and Ferrari's Kimi Raikkonen receives a penalty demotion, giving Mercedes their second successive Constructors' Championship. And a new star's on the rise for the Proteas as Kagiso Rabada holds his composure. He steers the ship home with a fantastic final over in the first ODI against India since the World Cup down under. Now, that's what we're going to be showing to you in the sports. We'll also be chatting to Skolele Stotelelwa. So back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. That's your sports coming up a little bit later. Right now, let's take a look at your top story this hour. Chaos has erupted at Kaya Sands in Randburg, where residents have been involved in a service delivery protest. Protesters say they were promised better housing, but were lied to, as nothing has been forthcoming. Riverband Road as well as Malibongwe Drive have been affected. Gillian Pillay is monitoring the story, and she now joins us on the line. A very good morning to you, Gillian. And can you paint us a picture of the scene right now?
A very good morning to you, Elvis. Yes, those chaotic scenes have, it's simmered down quite a bit. There's still a heavy police presence here, and they've contained the situation. At the present moment, what we're looking at is that community leaders are now addressing large mobs of the community who have marched here. As you said, there's a lot of misunderstandings and grievances around a development project that's set to take place at the Lion Park, not far from here. Many are saying they've lived here for something like 22 years, and that's the kind of anger that has fueled this protest. What we did see this morning was a lot of roads were barricaded. We can still see some sort of tires that were burnt. Police had to use tear gas at some stage, but they've contained the situation. We've also spoken to a representative from Human Settlements who has also cleared up, it's the community versus government. And what the representative has said to us is that the development is going to take place, but it's being halted by a large sewage problem that they need to sort out before the development can take place, Albert. So those chaotic scenes, yes, it was that situation this morning. But like I said, the situation has been contained. Community leaders are addressing members of the community, and they're listening to the interactions, and they're yet to be addressed by a representative of government. Like they said earlier, they are going to hand over memorandum to government so that their grievances could be set out. Albert.
What will happen after this meeting?
Well, from our discussions with the guys who are representing the community, they want to sit down with government so that they can get clear timelines of when the development will take place. Are they part of the development? And because they don't want to be relocated to another area. They're saying, it has disastrous consequences on transport costs, on their living conditions. Like I said, many have been living here for 2 decades, for over 2 decades. So I think what is likely to happen is that the community, together with government, will sit together and, iron out the misunderstandings, see where they can meet each other halfway, so that, the situation doesn't continue, Albert.
Earlier, we were told by the JMPD that the roads were closed around the area. Is that still the case?
I'm currently standing in Rubberband Road, Albert, and this is where the community has been cordoned off. I'm not sure what the situation is currently on Malibongwe, but when we drove in this morning, it was easy to get in. There wasn't, you're not allowed to go here, you're not allowed to go there. Yes, motorists have been advised to stay clear of the roads linking that's around Rubberband where this protest is taking place. But currently, we're in Rubberband Road. The community has been cordoned off here, and I can't really say what the situation is with regard to Malibongwe and the other arteries around where the protest is taking place, Albert.
Gillian, thank you so much for that update. That was a reporter on the scene, Gillian Pillay. Now, the ANC has made a renewed call for unity at the closing of the National General Council in Midrand, north of Johannesburg in Gauteng. The party's president, Jacob Zuma, says the movement has resolved to mobilize all South Africans behind its vision of a non-racial country.
The song saying the day we returned, perhaps apt for the mission this organization wants to embark upon. In a frank assessment of its work, the ANC says it's putting corrective measures into place. First, reaffirming the centrality of its branches.
The branch is the basic unit of the ANC and the most important structure in the movement. It is in the branch that ANC members put to use their skills, energy, political insight, and experience in a program to transform society.
But the party knows it will have to do much to repair its image, from rooting out corruption to winning back its traditional support base.
Government should conduct a lifestyle audit for all employees of the state and its related entities.
The number of provinces is also said to be reviewed to strengthen government. The party has also urged full implementation on 50-50 gender principle. But the biggest headache for the ANC is next year's local government elections. Some metros are in danger of slipping out of their hands.
The NGC has noted the voting trends in the metros and that this requires the movement to review its strategies.
Delegates have described this NGC as the most successful. This NGC has seen a renewed sense of optimism from these delegates. But they know very well that optimism alone will not be sufficient. What is required is for them to go out and implement whatever they have agreed upon. Mzwande Limbeji, SABC News, Midrand.
Meanwhile, President Jacob Zuma refuted reports that Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir will travel to South Africa in November. He made the statement as he sought to explain why South Africa has opted to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. This, after the NGC of the ANC passed a resolution for the country to leave the court. It is now up to Parliament to decide whether South Africa should withdraw from the court. The government has been criticized for ignoring an order to arrest al-Bashir, who was indicted by the ICC when he attended a conference here in Johannesburg in June.
The NGC has taken a decision that the country should consider withdrawing from the ICC because it is unfair in the manner in which it has been dealing with things. Now, of course, the matter of the ICC in the continent of Africa is no longer a matter of individual country. It's a matter of the AU as an organization, that many of the countries are signatories to the ICC. There is a background to this. In the eyes of the African leaders is that the ICC is biased. It takes decisions, a particular decision, some of them, which are not necessarily justified at the end, on African leaders. For an example, African leaders who are discussing the issue, at one point, looking at their own issues and the manner in which to get rid of pockets of problems in the continent, when the warrant of arrest was issued for President Bashir, at that time, the negotiations to bring about peace in Darfur were at a very delicate stage, and Bashir was part of the stakeholders. And in the view of the AU was that you needed him at that moment just to clinch the deal, and thereafter you could then deal with it. That if at that point you arrested him, you would actually scupper the process. And the AU as an organization took it upon itself to talk to the ICC to say, could you withdraw the warrant? We are not saying he should not be arrested for this moment, because we think we need him now to help bring about peace. They ignored it. They did not even worry about it. And the AU was worried. This is the first case. Worried, why are you not taking, what are you interested in? Are you interested in to bring about peace and stability in Sudan, or are you just interested in arresting Bashir? In terms of weighing these two, the leaders felt they don't worry about what happens to the question of peace and stability. They're more worried about arresting people. And they were not saying don't arrest. They were saying let it be arrested, but give us time.
Farmers in the Dordrecht and Jamestown areas of the Eastern Cape are counting their losses following a week of devastating veld fires. The fires have destroyed an estimated 20,000 hectares of grazing and farmland. The Rural Development and Agrarian Reform Department is assessing the damage to determine how they can assist the farmers. Thousands of members of trade union AMCU have voted overwhelmingly for a strike in the gold mining sector. AMCU has about 35,000 paid-up members in the sector and is the second largest union after the National Union of Mine Workers. The union led a bruising 5-month strike last year in the platinum sector. However, AMCU will wait for the Labour Court's ruling on the union's 2013 appeal to strike before serving notices on Sibanye Gold, Anglo Gold Ashanti and Harmony Gold. The country's gold producers, who are grappling with depressed prices and soaring cost, say they cannot afford the union's wage demand of 12,500 rand a month. On the continent now, counting has begun in Guinea's capital shortly after polling stations closed last night. The polls pitted the president, Alpha Condé, against his main rival, Celo Diallo. Now, this is the second election in the West African country since its independence from France nearly 60 years ago. The 77-year-old Condé is widely expected to win a second mandate, although the results were expected to be close enough to require a second round against Diallo. Around a dozen people died during clashes in the run-up to the polls, and the opposition calls for voting to be delayed because of fears about fraud. Some polling stations opened late, and there were complaints of lack of paperwork and officials arriving late in some of the polling stations. To Turkey now, who says that 2 male suicide bombers carried out the devastating twin bombings this weekend in Ankara. 97 people were killed and scores injured in the deadliest attack in the history of modern Turkey. Meanwhile, thousands of mourners filled the streets of Ankara and vented their anger at President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Pro-Kurdish supporters scuffle with police near the scene of twin suicide attacks the day before, after they tried to push through a security barricade to lay down carnations. Saturday's blasts at a pro-Kurdish rally in the Turkish capital left nearly 130 killed and scores more wounded. Elsewhere, in the mainly Kurdish southeastern city of Diyarbakir, police clash with protesters denouncing the attack. At the Ankara morgue, where bodies are still being identified, loved ones of those killed gathered to mourn their dead, their emotional wounds still raw. Survivors describe the gruesome attack, which some say was made worse by the authorities.
As we tried to carry the wounded away, police attacked us with tear gas canisters. And for about half an hour, we tried to run from the police that were preventing us from taking the wounded away. For almost 45 minutes, the wounded had to wait at the blast site. The ambulances did not come. They would not let the ambulance drive in.
The activists were protesting a recent flare-up in violence between security forces and the Kurdistan Workers' Party in the Kurdish southeast, which has left hundreds killed.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll take a look at our regional focus. The process to select a successor for King Buliyeli Kaya Dalindyebo as the king of the Tembu nation continues. His son, Azanati, has been identified as a possible successor. A meeting of traditional leaders started at the Bombani Great Place in the Eastern Cape. King Dalindyebo was ordered to serve a 12-year jail sentence last week by the appeal court to charges including kidnapping and arson. He's been given a 14-day reprieve to petition the Constitutional Court. Our reporter in the Eastern Cape, Kayaletu Gobo, went on a mission.
Talking about succession, this can be a complex process, especially in the kingdoms. Generally, what is known is that the king will select some elders who will go to another royal house and go and negotiate lobola. That princess or the future wife is expected to be the one who is going to give birth to an heir. Afterwards, the king can choose more wives, what we call kunene, to the great house, until we got to Iqhiba. Now, the problem arises when some of these wives or the great house does not have a son. But to take us further on this problem is Dr. Mdende, who is going to explain how this complex process of appointing who is going to be a selector is usually done.
Tamago, a marriage in African culture is a union between two families. It is not the king who chooses who is going to be his heir. It is the royal family. A king can have a polygamous marriage, that is the great wife, the right-hand wife, ukunene, the ikadi from the great wife, ikadi from ukunene, and Iqhiba, those 5 houses. If there is no son in the great house, then the culture says that people must go to ikadi of the great house. If there's no one there, the royal family decides which one should be the heir to the king. So, and it also happens that the king, according to their culture, who is the right person to this, then they will, the great house will choose. That is the point.
And now tell me, if there's no son altogether, can the brother to the king take over?
Again, it is the right of the royal family. When in all those 5 houses, which is impossible, there is no son, then the royal family decides which one should be should take the place of the king.
What we have at the moment is the issue of Abatembu, where there is some opposition or misunderstanding about this process. Who should be the rightful successor? Can we expect that there will be stability in the Abatembu kingdom in the near future or soon?
There will be stability because the question of succession with Abatembu kingship is not a problem, because no college Dalingebo, who is the mother of Avenati. Yes, that the college was married the official way. And we must understand that the king's home, they sent Onozaguzagu, the people, to Namakwe to pay lobola for no college. And those people who were selected by the royal council, not by the individual, now they were coming from different areas. For instance, it was Chief Dalakuba Joyi, it was Chief Zwelengaba from Tofimvaba, and it was also Chief Nganeni. So those 3 chiefs were not from Bumbane only, they were scattered. So that means they informed their own people in their own jurisdictions. That means all the Tembu clan, they knew that the king now is going to be married to a Tembu girl from Kudeni. You must understand that Abatembu from Kudeni are also from kingship. And no college was introduced to the ancestors of the Tembu girls of the Tembu clan. That is why even during the marriage, where there were buses, everybody knew that the king is going to be married now. The proper rituals were performed. She went to the kraal with the other girls, and the ritual, what we call a certificate in my tradition, the ritual of Ukukiswamasi was performed for no college. And Inkomo Yempotulo was slaughtered for no college. So she is the rightful wife, and her son is the rightful heir.
Before moving to the next question, in Eastern Pondoland, we have a sort of a similar situation where there are 3 claimants to the kingdom.
I don't want to argue on that, because these are different circumstances. The one of Pondoland and this one.
Yeah. Because my next question is this: why do we see a rise in these disputes over who should succeed or who is the rightful chief?
No. With the question of the Tembu people, yeah. There is no opposition, because if people are honest, because the son to King Zolibanzi is the one who should take over from him.
Yeah. As I say, just talking generally, not specifically about Abatembu, you have in different areas or other areas, more especially in the rural areas, where there's a dispute about a chief, or are people looking for power, or is it the question of incentive of money?
We must understand, I want to be honest now, is that because people know that the kings are paid more than $1 million, everybody wants to be in that base. Otherwise, if you follow the customary law, it should be the one who is chosen by the royal family. And in this particular case of Abatembu, the son to Zwelibanzi is the one who should be the heir. And her mother was married the traditional way. So there is no problem there.
Well, those are the views of Dr. Mdende, but I'm sure other people, groups or intellectuals have got different views. That will continue even after the ruling by the Constitutional Court on the Abatembu king. And we will always be ready to take those debates. And now it's back to the studio.
The catch-up program for learners who were affected by service delivery protests in certain parts of Limpopo has turned out to be a mixed bag of fortunes. While learning and teaching is in full swing in areas such as Vuwani, learners in the Zebediela area are still left out in the cold. The affected learners could not write the trial examinations, and they are only left with a few weeks before sitting for final exams. To get clarity on the Limpopo government catch-up plans, our SABC reporter Michael Maringa talked to the Limpopo MEC for Education, Ismail Khachepe.
Generally, we do a state of readiness for the examination, which tells us in each of the areas that has been disrupted, how ready are we for examination. And that state of readiness assessment tells us what work still has to be done. In those instances, you would find that we put programs in place to ensure that there's catch-up where there's catch-up has been done. As you are aware, we have now resumed the program of broadcasting some lessons for matriculants as part of the revision. We have some sprint classrooms in a number of areas so that the matric learners can pick the catch-up. In certain areas, they still have where trial examination, especially in Vuwani and in Zebediela, there will be a rewriting of the trial examination for some of the learners who are now ready to resume with the writing, and they're busy with it. Catch up where it's possible to catch up, and the learners generally should be ready for examination.
We have noted that some schools in the Vuwani, Masia, and the Feyeboom area are not busy with the catch-up program. Will this not affect these learners' results?
In the Vuwani area specifically, you'd be aware that they're actually busy with the trial examination. So generally, the schools there, in terms of the report we received with the Minister of Basic Education, is that at the time of disruption, the majority of the schools have actually concluded their curriculum. So they were at revision phase, most probably also getting ready for the trial examination. So in between writing of the trial examination papers, there are obviously schools that are doing catch-up in certain areas, that are doing revision in other areas. But it doesn't look like it's a major issue in that area, the issue of the completion of a curriculum, how much it will affect the results. Indeed, obviously, any disruptions, there is always a worry how much it will impact on the ultimate results at the end of the year. But you try a lot to mitigate how much you can catch up. And I have been assured, even by the district and second officials, that a lot of work is being done, and that we shouldn't be worried about how much will be affected. Even if we are affected, it will not be because there has not been effort on our side as a department to ensure that our learners are ready.
Will this not have an impact in the overall results of the province?
In most of those instances, there has been an attempt to catch up, and obviously the impact of that process will best be assessed by the examination itself. But the educators have been trying to make a catch-up. What was a worry is actually Zebediela was terminated very, very late. That's why you saw it's one area where we actually had to pull even the premier to come and say, can we look at focus on education? Can we resume education? And I think the community ultimately heard us. But we don't think, and we are now busy trying to look at Zebediela, how much we can fast-track the catch-up. It was not a smooth start. Yesterday we still had challenges here and there, but we are now geared to ensure that we are able to improve. But what we think ultimately the best time to assess how much will have impacted in specifically some of those areas where the termination was late will be a week or so before the examination. At that time will be perfect to be able to say how much it will affect us. But we don't think it should be, the major thing will be this disruption. Educators in the nature of their training should be knowing when you are falling back on a curriculum like this time, what are the avenues that are available. We have now done a lot of intervention programs, as I say, to assist that process.
MEC, various schools in the province were disrupted during violent protest. Weeks ahead of the final examination, surely as the department you are worried. Do you have plans in place to deal with this challenge?
Yes, indeed. I've been the most worried, and I'm sure, somebody was asking, where are you going into communities where there are disruptions, but it's about job opportunities in the mines. You have the MEC for Education working there. It's partly because of our concern about how much education is being disrupted by this protest. My view is that we need a lot of community mobilization to draw awareness to the importance of education, so that even during protest, we ring-fence education so that our learners, our children are allowed to continue with schooling, so that they are able to take their rightful place in future when they are community leaders. They should be adequately skilled, adequately equipped to deal with the challenges of the 21st century. They won't be able to do that if we don't give them the opportunity to go and learn, and so that they are better prepared for the future. And I think we are now on my table. I know since I arrived at the department, there's been the directive to convene an education summit, which we'll do early next year, to engage the communities, how much the community stakeholders, so that we can see how much we filter that message down into our communities. I must say, in the Vuani area, for instance, we met a broad meeting, myself and the Minister of Basic Education. We met a broad meeting of community stakeholders who committed themselves that notwithstanding the challenges, we should be educating the community and canvassing them, so that if any of the disruption was to happen at any particular moment, education must be ring-fenced. We need that kind of also a community awareness and canvassing, so that we protect education, but also we protect our children so that they can have a better future.
That's our reporter Michael Moringa talking to the Limpopo MEC for Education, Ismail Kachepe. That's how we end our news for now. Kendall Makamate is standing by with your sports news.
Makamelo Sekhuntse, one strong woman who said no to hunger. She never allowed circumstances to pull her down. At daybreak, she is up and running in the streets of Johannesburg to make her living. After 12 hours of hard work, she goes back home being able to put food on the table. Join me, Bule Molebatsi, on your show about those who take on and conquer life challenges every Saturday at 5:30.
Welcome back. My name is Kendall Makhamat, and I've got your sports on Newsroom. Now, besides the Rugby World Cup, there's been a whole host of other sports that have been happening over the weekend. Now, here's a wrap of all the other sports events making headlines over the weekend. Let's take a look.
Solid from the Pumas, de Klerk. Lovely little inside ball to Buerta. De Klerk, this is good ball now for the Pumas. Rudy Mathieu, big, strong. Keen out as good as Mona Skuman. What a pickup from Mona Skuman. And what a start from this Pumas team. They've got the early score within 4 minutes. This is
Right, now that was a quick sneak peek into what I would be chatting with Xolile Sotshelelo about, not necessarily a wrap of all the weekend stuff. As you would know, it's all Formula One. It was Currie Cup rugby, as we've just seen, as well as the Proteas doing incredible stuff out on the subcontinent. But it was a veritable cracker this weekend, with sports fans spoilt for choice. Besides that World Cup, the Proteas were also in action on the subcontinent, continuing with their winning streak after wrapping up a successful T20 series. To talk to me about all this and everything else is Xolile Sotshelelo, SABC sports journalist. Good morning. Welcome back to Newsroom.
Morning, Kendall. What a weekend. What a weekend it's been. Good morning to your listeners as well and viewers. But yeah, with the cricket, Proteas ticked the first box, which was always important to win the first match.
You jumping the gun? I'll tell you why you're jumping the gun, because I've got quite a lot of stuff I want to discuss with you at the top of this chat with regards to Proteas. What I am hoping to do is to touch on what's actually been flying under the radar for a lot of rugby fans, the Currie Cup, the domestic league. This last weekend, the matches were played on Friday to make space for the Rugby World Cup. But what matches they were? This was the penultimate round, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed, it was. And the teams that were flying way up throughout the season are the ones that did show up in the last round pool matches. And the two teams that do look threatening are the Lions and the Western Province, but the semi-final teams have been announced and all action will be taking next weekend. But two players that stood out for me throughout the Currie Cup campaign are players who I personally think should have been in the World Cup squad for the Springboks, are players like Faf de Klerk and Marcel Coetzee. And for some, maybe some would have said Hougaard, the scrummer from the Blue Bulls, who should have been with the Springboks. But however, the Currie Cup on its own, it's always nice seeing how each team plays, you know, without the Springboks, especially teams like the Sharks, even though they drew on Saturday and lost out in a semi-final spot. But in a nutshell, the Sharks have just been atrocious this year.
They have been atrocious, haven't they? It's quite interesting because coming in from last year as well, they've actually been struggling all along. What do you think is going on at the Sharks?
Plenty of changes upstairs, which does infiltrate into the players in the changing room and how the players play, the style of play. They've got a couple of senior players, but that shouldn't be the worry, because if you look at the team, at a team like the Lions, who've got very few players who've represented the Springboks, you know, even they've got a player who should have been at the World Cup in Warren Whiteley. But if you compare the two teams, the Lions are far well underexperienced if you compare the two teams.
All right, now let's go through to the Rugby World Cup, because I know that you did watch a little bit about the Rugby World Cup. We had a chat on it in the earlier hour, but I'd like to get your opinions on what the top match of this weekend was.
Well, if you look at last night, the Ireland-France game, it was pretty intense, high intense.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it must have been the Australian-Wales, because there was a lot riding on it for us as Springbok supporters and Springboks followers, you know. But the Welsh did let go of the game, because the Aussies were 2 men down at some point and they didn't convert their chances. I think they must have had three scoring opportunities in the Aussie half, but they went for the line, which was the difference at the end of the day. And now they face a tough task of facing the Springboks.
With that said, I mean, the decision making is always comes up in moments like this when it doesn't quite work out. Had it worked out, though, they would have won that match.
I mean, if you look at a fine example, England, had they taken the 3 points and drawn that match and come and beat USA with the bonus point, they would have gone through to the next round. But you know, it's decisions. And one of the games that I was doing over the weekend commentary on, I can't remember which game, but there was I think it must have been Romania. Just the way they played the response between to Italy, you know, the fly half was just kicking everything, and the result at the end of the day was a pretty close one due to his kicking ability.
Told to tell. Well said there. Very interesting take on that one. Let's go through to the Proteas on the subcontinent. They've got a new win now. That's what's 3 in a row, 3 on the trot. The T20, last T20 washed out, and now they've got a first ODI win since the World Cup. Against India, at least.
Yeah, that loss to India in the World Cup was quite tough for the Proteas. But however, it was important for them to start off this ODI series on a high, and that's what happened with the bat, winning the toss and choosing to bat first and scoring the runs on the board, 300 plus, which has never been scored at that ground, which has hosted very little international cricket, but some of the players would have been accustomed to some of the conditions, having played IPL throughout the years. Players like Abi Morkel, who would have given a bit of assistance to the younger players like Kagiso Rabada, who, for me, was the standout performer on the day, bar AB de Villiers' 100 and that over from Imran Tahir. But if you look at his efforts in that last over, I mean, a 20-year-old having to defend 11 runs off his last over, it's something phenomenal.
He did say that it was the most pressure that he's ever been under, considering that he's been playing cricket since his youth days, but the standing of the players he was playing against, the match that he was playing in, was a lot of pressure, and he managed it pretty well. He did well. He would have been also buoyed by the responsibility of having to share the new ball with Dale Steyn, which was what happened, and the longer spells, which I wasn't too happy to see at the first 10 overs. And the captaincy of AB de Villiers was tested at times in that run chase, where he needed to slow the game down, was stuck between picking Imran Tahir to spin him in those first 10 overs and choosing Farhan Biardeen, JP Dumini, who were a bit expensive. But at the end, Imran Tahir had that one over at the back end, and that's where the game changed. One of the things that our viewers are looking at right now is AB de Villiers, and everybody who watched that particular match must have been astounded at the reception that AB got when he walked on. The crowd was chanting AB, AB, AB. The man is incredibly popular, and it's not just because of his IPL standings, is it? I think it's that. Kendall. I think it's because the players know every single year they'll have 4 weeks of AB de Villiers. And, each time he wears that RCB shirt, he gives his full ability. And even when he plays for the Proteas, we saw in the match his quick 100 of 73 balls, which was that much-needed injection in the Proteas innings, even though Faf du Plessis also put together 66 runs. But in a nutshell, the Proteas did well, and it was important for them to win that first ODI going into the second one. Very good. And Rabada, like you said a little earlier, he really stood to the test of time. He went in there, he did what he needed to do. Fantastic bowling by him. He was being flanked by Hashim Amla, apparently, as well as AB while he was bowling, just to keep him on the calm, on the level, and he really did extremely well. Do you think that they're nurturing him well enough to take him to the top of the top within the next few years? Well enough. You're speaking of years to come. I'm speaking now, because let's be honest. Dale Steyn and Morne Morkel have been superb for the Proteas in Test cricket, in ODI cricket, and sometimes in T20 cricket. But now they need to start thinking forward. And what better time now when you've got a lovely summer of India, 4 Test matches with India, 4 Test matches with England, and 10 ODIs between those two nations. And what an opportunity for a young player like Kagiso Rabada to express himself and showcase his ability. And one thing I always say about the young man is that it's always good as a coach to work with raw talent in a fast bowler, where you can tweak there and there and there, but you can see he's enthusiastic and he's enjoying his time and he's enjoying his cricket at the moment, and that's what you see. That's what you want to see when you watch an international team. And in closing, who else do you think should be standing out in terms of the newbies in the Proteas squad to say, look, they are the next generation? De Kock, Eddie Lee, who? I was happy to see Quinton de Kock back into the ODI side. Even though he scored 29, he looked good, he looked solid, even though he was done by Ashwin. But Quinton de Kock, the likes of Riley Rousseau, the likes of Kagiso Rabada, Aiden Markram, who hasn't been given that much opportunity in domestic cricket, but those players, Kaya Zondo, those are players who we can look to look at in the years to come. No, very good. Xolele, thank you very much for coming through and chatting to us about the best of the best from the weekend. There was the domestic cricket that we could have touched on, but I think we'll do that a little later this week or maybe next week. Plenty of action. Momentum One Day Cup started off on a high. A lot of runs, but we'll talk on it. No, very good. That was Xolele Sotshelela giving us the lowdown on the best of the best from the weekend. That's why we leave it with the sport. Up next, the weather forecast.
Welcome from the weather desk. A couple of weather headlines to look out for. First of all, of course, the heat wave that we're expecting in South Africa, some droughts, and then eco-mobility is just something a little bit lighter in terms of trying to save the planet there and keeping our carbon footprint at a much lower level than it is. The weather for today, there is that heat wave that I mentioned and possibility of veld fires Also accelerated or increased risk of droughts that we're expecting over South Africa. Most are affected are the Eastern Cape province as well as into some parts of KwaZulu-Natal. That way we're going to have serious water shortages. For your weather, there's up to 60 or rather 30% chance of rain expected towards that northeastern interior for today and tomorrow. We're seeing a spread of showers moving all the way towards the northern parts of southern Africa. Botswana, Namibia, definitely you should expect some rain for tomorrow. Otherwise, clear skies are expected for much of the west with partly cloudy skies along the coastal regions. Your temperatures still fairly high for most parts. It goes to about the mid-30s for Gauteng as well as over the northwest province. Then some sunny skies are expected for the northwest for today. Tomorrow it's going to get a bit cloudy. Possibilities of showers towards Mpumalanga as well as over the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal. Sunny skies for the Western Cape province going all the way towards the Western Coast District as temperatures go into about 20s for Port Nolloth as well as over Alexander Bay. It gets very hot for Windhoek and Keetmanshoop into the mid-30s. Further towards the northern parts of Namibia, do expect even hotter conditions. Places such as Oshakati going as high as 37 degrees. Rundu is at 38. And moving into Botswana, you'll see partly cloudy skies just along the western half. By tomorrow, those clouds will have built up and there'll be a chance of rain. 40 for Maun, Khansi is at 38 degrees. Francistown also into those upper 30s. Hot weather all throughout southern Africa into Bulawayo, Maswingo. Those are into the mid-30s. Sunny skies are expected for the northern parts. A bit of clouds and now a bit of a relief for Beitbridge. Yesterday it was 40 degrees, so now it has dropped by 7 degrees to just around 33. Still quite hot, but it's a lot better. Kuamba 34, Lichinga, sunny skies. Also nothing has changed here. And then a bit of clouds also returning to Maputo. Yesterday there was some rain. Today we're not expecting much. Even tomorrow it will be a bit clearer. Temperatures are expected to be into the lower 30s with those clouds. Also expected for Tolanaro going up north along the coast of Madagascar. And you see over the northern parts, that's where temperatures start to increase up to around 33 to 34 degrees. That's where I'll leave it for the weather, but do stay tuned. There'll be more news here on SABC News.
Thank you. That is Tsetse Manade with his final update here in the Newsroom show. We're coming towards the end of it now, 9 to 12. Of course, in the morning I'm with Anine. Anine, before we wrap it up, just give us a quick little roundup. What's happening? Got a couple of developing stories?
Yeah, well, Eben, Kaya Sands definitely still trending this morning, but we know police seem to have things under control. That over there, I think we do have a video from our reporter, Jock Steenkamp. He tweeted that a bit earlier. Just that gives you an idea of how many people have been taking part in this Kaya Sands kind of protest. But police are at the River Bends Road, where kind of meets with Witkoppen. As far as Twitter...
Calm has been restored?
Yeah, what Twitter is saying is that they're stopping the protesters from entering Witkoppen. So that's good.
Okay, so calm has been restored. We're going to see traffic return to normal sometime this afternoon, hopefully. One would think. And Gillian said that everything seems to be in order as well. What? That's it. Kretcher and Donald Duck before you wrap it.
Kretcher's sentencing postponed until next month, so we'll only know what's happening with that a bit later this month. And then DJ Donald Duck judgment is currently still taking place, but we know it's been an emotional morning in court where family members have been crying of course, Dolly Chabalala. So just keep an eye on Twitter for hashtag DJ Donald Duck for more on that story.
Yeah, that's an ongoing story. We'll keep you updated on the rest on this very platform later in the day as judgment is completed in the Donald Sebolai judgment ongoing right now. That's where we wrap it today. That's it? That's the tail of the tape? Well, that is the tail of the tape. Thank you very much for joining us today. Newsroom, of course, is broadcast every weekday between 9 and 12 now in the morning. Elvis is almost here to come and say goodbye. Come, Elvis, we're going to wait for you to come and say goodbye. He was having a cup of tea there, by the way. Quick one.
Right. Well, that's all we have for you for today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. We'll see you then. From myself, Elvis Breslin.
And me.
Goodbye.
And you. Bye, guys.